The world which we live in today is as brutal as it is stupid. Everywhere blood is being spread, insecurity is development, poverty is exploding. And what are we asked to do? We're told to shut up. We're told to accept everything. Today, our question, the question is, will we resist or capitulate? Therefore, we organize these 3 days of conference of training and mobilization, education. You have the program, very rich program in your hands. Tomorrow we have a training day on science, culture. Everybody's invited. And Monday there will be on the field, underground deployments in Paris. You can inscribe at the table. The second part of the panel will be in English. Be sure that you have translation equipment. For the English speakers, of course, it will be Jacques Cheminade in the beginning. Cheminade has been 3 times candidate to the presidential elections. He has already changed this country by his presidential campaigns. I invite Jacques Cheminade to the microphone.
Changer de manière de penser.
Time to change your way of thinking. Hello, everybody.
Changer de manière de penser.
Time to change your way of thinking.
Nous sommes tous mortels.
We are all mortal, and history is tragic. If we were to remain as we are, we will become less than animals, infected by the comfort of impotent pessimism that always leads to the worst. Today, faced with the risk of war and the impact of an inevitable financial collapse that would drag down the entire economy, if nothing is done to prevent it, it will happen. Therefore, we have to react and mobilize ourselves. However, to do so, and to do it well, in this France and in this world of autumn 2025, our minds must be prepared. That is the aim of our 2-3 days, where we all should mobilize. The challenge is, of course, within our country, but even more so on a global scale, because this is the 21st century. We are all in the same boat, like the crew in the fourth book of Rabelais, saved by a Pantagruel, who takes the helm because he knows that his responsibility is to become a cooperator with God, or, for those who find that this world unsettling, a cooperator with the common destiny of humanity. That is why Solidarité et Progrès invited the young people of the Schiller Institute, patriots and world citizens from almost everywhere, to save together our share of immortality, this debt that we have, not a financial debt, this debt that we have contracted towards our predecessors and that we must pay to future generations by acting for a France and a world with the eyes of the future. The world is once again on the brink of nuclear war. War seems to define all of humanity. The reality and Le Monde. War is everywhere. On Netflix, A House of Dynamite imagines a nuclear attack on America. Our friend Theodore Postel shows us the consequences of a nuclear escalation, the annihilation of the world. Donald Trump has just called for the resumption of American nuclear tests because he mistakenly perceived in Vladimir Putin's announcement of the launch of the nuclear-powered Brezhnev missile and the Poseidon torpedo, he saw in that resumption of these tests by the Russians. In a world where the missiles of a major nuclear powers are on permanent alert, firing at the slightest warning, and where all the treaties signed during the Cold War have been abrogated, with the exception of the 2010 New START Treaty, whose deadline is February 5, 2026, Vladimir Putin has asked for its provisions to be extended for another year. There are about 12,000 nuclear warheads in the world, and a human error can be fatal at any moment. It nearly happened several times. You will note that to begin with, I'm not talking about the French budget, the suspension of the pension reform, or the terrible crisis in education and social housing in this country. These are very important issues, but their answers are not determined by the mood or the agendas of those who address or vote on them. They are part of the context I am describing. One can answer, and one can only answer, as Einstein said, we cannot give an answer in the terms of which the problem is posed. The challenge is to change our way of thinking and acting inspired by this change. By this change of way of thinking. That is why my commitment makes me optimistic. It is the secret to my activity at my age, about 84 years. I believe, like the French assassinated leader Jean Jaurès, that in our France on vital issues there is an inertia of thought, a slumber of the mind that exposes us to all sorts of surprises until the days when those luminous awakenings occurs, which fortunately, albeit at all too long intervals, save our country. End of quote. I like this quote because it tells us that we have to get started if we want to save. The hope springs from this groundswell sweeping the world. It is the demand of all peoples who have been colonized by force or weapons or by money to exercise their right of self-determination and development. This development, which is the new name for peace, as Pope Paul VI reminded us in Popular Progresso, or as the leaders present in Bandung in 1955 already demanded. This groundswell is manifesting itself with the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Group of 77, and in reality, in the global majority. Vladimir Putin is calling for a polyphonic society in which everyone's voice will be heard to create a better whole where people are singing on the right tone. With Lula and Xi Jinping, Putin is working to establish new platforms of development, of investments, and trade in national currencies based on common instruments of reference without the exorbitant privilege of a dollar subject to financial market speculation. And Xi Jinping in 2017 stated, quote, the community of shared future for mankind, as its name suggests, means that the future of each nation and country is closely linked to that of other nations and countries. We must share our ups and downs and live in harmony in this great common home of our planet in order to realize the aspirations of the world's people for a better life. We have to listen to them, these men and women, to avoid a fatal conflagration between blocs, hoping to offer them our voice, those of the voice of those who are here, which is unique to us and which I will discuss shortly. However, I first want to tell you what a human being can achieve, a real human being, when he calmly mobilizes his humanity, defying all pre-established protocols. To return to the risk we face, we are talking about three men who saved the world by refusing to follow military procedures in the name of the higher principle of humanity. I have often thought of them throughout my life. First, there were two Russians, Vasily Arkhipov and Stanislav Petrov. In November 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vasily, a Soviet naval officer, was in his submarine off the American coast. His commander ordered him to launch a nuclear-tipped torpedo against a nuclear target, an American target. Along with other fellow officers, he refused, thus preventing a nuclear war and the world's annihilation. On November 26, 1983, Stanislav was on duty at his nuclear early warning station when it indicated five American ballistic missiles heading towards the Soviet Union, the screen displaying the flashing red launch signal, the order to retaliate. He did not obey the signal. He did not have absolute faith in anti-ballistic missile technology to guide a life or death decision, and deemed it necessary not to inform headquarters, which would logically have issued a nuclear retaliatory order, thus sparing the world a nuclear war and its annihilation. The third person to decide on a life-saving inaction was an American. His name was Leonard Perutz, an Air Force officer and military intelligence agent. It was in November 1983, during NATO's nuclear military exercise called Able Archer 83, an exercise involving a simulated attack on the USSR, quote, with nuclear warheads against predetermined fixed targets. The legend being that the Russian city then in question would have been Kiev. Worried, the Soviet forces began to think it was for real. Marshal Olgarkov retreated to his bunker and put his forces on high alert. Leonard should have warned his superiors, but he decided against it, weighing the consequences of what was becoming a foolish standoff. In doing so, he spared the world of a nuclear war and its annihilation. I don't mention the behavior of these men as anecdotes, but to try to make you understand what in each of them could have led them to disobey orders in the name of a higher purpose, and to relive within ourselves what they must have felt, this terrible instant of a couple of seconds. It was all the more courageous, Stanislav on September 26 and Leonard on November 11, because on September 1 of that same year, 1983, a Korean Airlines civilian aircraft 007 having entered Soviet airspace in Asia, either by mistake or because it was equipped with embedded spy cameras outside of its flight plan, was shot down by Sukhoi, killing its 226 passengers and 23 crew members, and created a virtually unbearable tension. Three examples. These three examples illustrate the dangers of military and nuclear power, vulnerable to human error or cynical calculations. This underscores the necessity of implementing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, of July 7, 2017, now signed by 94 states. More than 80 have ratified it so far, including especially the Holy See, while none of the nuclear-armed states or their allies have signed it. On the eve of November 11, commemorating the 107th anniversary of the armistice ending the First World War, it is high time we uphold the sovereignty of all peoples, respect for international law, and the Charter of the United Nations in order to build peace. Our international peace coalition, Peace Through Development, joins the commitment of the Holy See and here in France of the Republican Association of Combatants for Friendship, Solidarity, Memory, Anti-Fascism and Peace, the ARAC Association. However, simply waging war on war is not enough to build peace. Peace must be driven by a positive dynamic, which is the new architecture of mutual development and security championed jointly by Solidarité Progrès and the Schiller Institute. José Vega and Diane Sare will speak about our fight in the United States, and this afternoon our African friends will speak about their desire for emancipation and a definitive break from all forms of colonialism and imperialism by creating an economic and cultural foundations of truly sovereign nation states. They will be the representatives of this underlying movement. I will now tell you why the Bandung non-aligned movement of 1955 failed in the past, as did the decolonization movement of the 60s and the 70s. France is a prime example. We decolonized in form, but not in principle or intention. Like the United Kingdom, we carried out colored decolonizations, supporting the comprador elites of the decolonized countries, generally remaining beholden to neocolonialism and the existing financial system. We thus maintained and waged criminal wars to retain control of natural resources and the unequal exchange of raw materials. Today, as entire generations of young people in these countries rise up, the time has come, and this is why we are here, to do together what has not been done yet, not out of vain, gloomy repentance, but out of a mission of justice. With, for these countries, a national currency for themselves and by themselves, which is no longer of the CFA franc or a euro of the same ilk. Once again, this requires us to change our way of thinking. Let me put it bluntly. It is the shortcomings in the behavior of those who have occupied our institutions of reference, be it the Church, the Communist Party, or the Republic, that have led us to where we are today. The fundamentalism and formalism of these institutions have paralyzed the spirit of creativity. This is why I titled my book Responding to the Cry of the People, because I believe that since Jules Valle's Paris Commune, no one has truly answered it. Today, in our country, everyone is talking about the people, but the current political regime is afraid of them, and its opposition is dividing it. You might say, De Gaulle, De Gaulle. Remembering one of my early campaigns to think bigger than the goal, I'd like to explain what I meant by that more imperfectly than then, but which I understand better today. I certainly don't want to diminish the immense merit of General de Gaulle, who broke with the corrupt system and attempted to build a new one. Against Nazism, Pétain's Vichy regime and the Amgot, with comrades in his image, like Romain Gary, Jean Moulin, Pierre Mendès France, and Marie-Madeleine Fourcade, not forgetting the harsh opposition between communists and Gaullists in domestic politics, but with a shared commitment to human labor, economic development, and the rebirth of an industrial France. And let's not forget the appeal of Charles Tillon of June 17, 1940. But to simply repeat what our predecessors have already done to become mere imitators is to betray their creative spirit. It's it's like reading a speech instead of speaking it freshly with your voice. Nearly all politicians today who pretend to admire de Gaulle and betray him. These administrators hire sometimes even more so than others. It is the party system, with everyone submitting to external unifiers while pretending to fight against amongst themselves internally. We've seen the NUPES, the National Rally, and the extreme center all agreed to participate in this war provoked in Europe by agreeing to supply weapons to Ukraine. This war that reduces us to a vassalage to the world of money, that of the City of London and Wall Street, which by its very nature leads us to war. It's no wonder young people don't like it. If we do not change course, we are inevitably heading towards war. Our Army Chief of Staff, Pierre Schill, is considering deploying our soldiers in Ukraine. The Chief of the Defense Staff, Fabien Mondon, is considering an armed clash in 3 to 4 years provoked by Russia, in line with the logic of high-intensity conflict in Europe, which has been our working hypothesis for several years. It's not today. Hubert Bonneau, the Director General of the Gendarmerie Nationale, is ready to suppress internal unrest resulting from this state of war. Pierre Vendier, the Supreme Allied Commander for NATO transformation, is promoting the integration of European resources and urging us to stop NATO bashing. While our European economies are in crisis, the financial markets continue their meteoric rise, driven by defense companies. The stocks be Safran or Rheinmetall. The Stocks Europe Targeted Defense Stock Index gained 102% in the first 10 months of this year. Specialized defense investment funds are being created by French banks, and the Directorate General of Armaments has even created a club of investors eager to support our defense company. It's utterly obscene. It's obscene because it's not really about our defense, but about money. That this is where our most terrible weakness appears. Their thinking is victim of Aristotelianism, keeping us at the same level, that of incompatibility of contradictory things, without gathering a cognitive resources to reach the coincidence of opposites. These are the words of the great thinker of the dawn of the Renaissance, Nicolas of Cusa, who changed the way we think. There have been many academic experts on his work, but Helga LaRouche, who is here with us today, was the one who gave it its necessary and crucial political relevance, and she will speak to you about it much better than I can. I simply want to tell you two things. The first is that Aristotelianism binds you to a level where the other, being inherently contradictory, precisely because they are other, cannot be your own happiness, cannot be reconciled with mine in a win-win situation. The other becomes an existential enemy
j'ai besoin de combattre pour
which have to
exister.
fight in order
C'est
to
la logique
exist.
de l'anti
This is the logic of the anti,
qui mène fatalement à la
which
géopolitique amiénée,
fatally
puis à l'économie
leads
de guerre et
to
enfin à la guerre elle-même.
friend-enemy
Et c'est
geopolitics,
toutefois
then a war, then to a war economy, and finally to a war
les dons
itself.
nucléaires, les
And
dons
this
nucléaires.
time, everyone
Extraire ces dons
has
est un combat nécessaire.
nuclear teeth.
Mais on ne peut
Extracting these
l'entretenir
nuclear
qu'en les
teeth
rendant inutiles
is a necessary
par la mise en
struggle, but
œuvre
it
du
can only be
développement
achieved by
mutuel,
rendering
la
them
coïncidence
useless
des opposés,
through the
et
implementation
des
of
autres
mutual
hypothèses
development, the convergence of opposites at a higher level of hypothesis,
à un niveau qui reste à imaginer,
a level
mais
which
dont on conçoit la nécessité.
needs to be
C'était le but de notre
imagined.
planification indicative en France.
This was the aim of our indicative planning,
C'était le but de notre planification indicative, mais elle demeurait linéaire, fixée à un
but it
objectif
kept
donné,
linear, fixed
sans
to a
élever
given
ou
objective and
déployer
without rising
réellement
to a
dans
truly higher dynamic,
ce que les penseurs chinois
what
appellent
the
aujourd'hui
Chinese thinkers call
auto-révolution.
today
Elle visait,
self-revolution.
notre planification,
Its aim,
à
the
réduire
planification,
l'incertitude
was to
vis-à-vis
reduce
d'objectifs
the
acceptés
uncertainties
par les opposants
regarding
mutuels,
objective accepted by
bien
mutual
entendus,
consent,
mais non à
but
repenser
not to
constamment ces
constantly
objectifs
rethink these objectives,
pour accroître la capacité
to
d'accueil d'une
increase
société
society's
en créant de
capacity
ressources
to
nouvelles.
absorb new
Les objectifs
resources.
même de ces
The very
sociétés
objectives of
doivent
that
constamment
society
s'élever.
must
Les
constantly
opposés
rise.
ne sont pas des contraires,
The opposites are not
contrairement à
absolute
tous les préjugés
contradictions.
qui s'expriment entre les peuples. Ce qu'on peut voir dans notre assemblée
Contrary to all
nationale
the
et dans son
prejudices
action,
expressed between
dans le
peoples,
visage
as seen
du
in our
président de
National
la République,
Assembly and reflected in the
une
face
sorte
of our
d'algorithme
President of the Republic,
fonctionnant
a
en
kind of
haute
algorithm
anticondition,
functioning at
prisonnier
best in two
majeur de
dimensions
ces axiomes
and a
répétitifs
raging
de vie.
prisoner of these repetitive
Voilà, c'était le
behavioral
but.
axioms.
Oui, voilà. Je crois qu'elle représente bien la réalité. Le problème est qu'Emmanuel Macron n'est que
The
l'expression
problem
d'une longue
with
série qui l'a précédé.
Macron
Et
is
notre
merely the
chance est de le
expression of a
libérer
long series that preceded
en
him
concevant l'unité
and
de
from
l'humanité
which it is our mission to
au-delà des
liberate
groupements,
ourselves.
mais avec le même potentiel en chacun d'entre nous.
By conceiving of the unity of
La nature
humanity
du défi
beyond
est devenue à la fois
multiplicity
plus élevée, plus
with the same
dangereuse,
potential
mieux
for each of
identifiable,
us.
depuis que le domaine de
The
l'intelligence
nature of the
artificielle
challenge has become
s'est infiltré
simultaneously greater,
dans
more
le domaine de
dangerous,
l'intelligence
and more
artificielle
clearly
s'est
defined
infiltré
since the
jusque dans
field
nos
of
vies intimes.
artificial intelligence has infiltrated
Je ne vais
our
pas m'étendre
private
sur ce
lives.
point devenu
I
essentiel,
cannot elaborate
tant
on
j'aurais
this
voulu.
now
Défi mieux
crucial point
identifiable.
as much as I would have
L'intelligence
liked.
artificielle
The
n'est que la
challenge is more clearly
multiplication
defined. Artificial
de
intelligence
manière
is simply the
aristotélicienne de
multiplication of
pensée
the
à une
Aristotelian way of
vitesse proche de
thinking
celle de la
at
lumière.
near light speed.
D'où son utilité pour
Hence,
résoudre
its
tous les problèmes de
usefulness
la déduction, de
in
l'induction,
resolving everything
tout ce qui
related to
relève du
deduction
déjà
and
existant,
induction, everything related to the logical
déjà
already
existant de logique,
existing, but
mais
also
aussi son
its
incapacité à créer.
inability
Sam Altman,
to create.
co-créateur d'OpenAI
Sam
et Jacques
Altman,
Cheminade,
co-creator of OpenAI
a dit lui-même
and father of
souvent,
ChatGPT,
on
himself
est
says,
tenté de considérer
often we're
l'intelligence
tempted to
artificielle comme
consider
une créature,
AI comme a
mais il ne s'agit
creature
que d'un outil.
while it's only a
Lors d'une
tool.
expérience récente,
In a
un
recent
ordinateur
experiment, an
d'intelligence artificielle
AI
a
computer
été engagé en
competed against
compétition
children
avec des
aged
enfants de
3
3 à
to
7 ans.
7.
Il s'agissait de
The
désigner,
task was to draw a
dessiner un
circle
cercle avec
using
des outils
available
disponibles,
tools
qui étaient une règle, une
put on the
théière,
table: a ruler,
et 3 objets qui n'étaient pas
a
pertinents.
teapot, and 3
L'ordinateur a
irrelevant
immédiatement
objects.
classé la
The
règle
computer
comme un
immediately
instrument de
classified the
dessin
ruler
et
as a
résultat
drawing
s'est fait,
instrument
comme
like a
c'était le cas.
compass and failed to draw a
Il a
circle.
raté son dessin de cercle.
He
Les
failed.
enfants, eux, ont
The
réfléchi.
children, however, thought about
C'était
it and
peut-être
realized
l'heure
that the
de
teapot
circuler.
was circular
Et
and indeed
ont
drew a
effectivement
perfect circle with
tracé
its
un cercle
outline.
parfait avec son contour. Ils ont pris la théière, contour. L'intuition créatrice des
The
enfants
children's
l'a su
creative
emporter
intuition
sur un
has
accumulateur
triumphed
de
over
données.
a data
Ajoutons un point
accumulator.
essentiel.
Let's add a
Bien
crucial
entendu, nous
point.
savons que le rire est le propre de l'homme.
Laughter is unique to
Or,
humans, yet
l'intelligence
IA
artificielle est si
is so
logique
logical that
qu'elle
it's
a l'incapacité
incapable
absolue à faire des
of
blagues,
telling
sauf
jokes,
si elle imite des blagues déjà faites. Mais elle
unless
est
it's only
incapable
imitating
d'engendrer le
jokes
rire.
already told before.
Cependant, le défi
However,
qu'Aristotélie
the
a posé
challenge
dans
posed by
l'intelligence
AI
artificielle
enhanced Aristotelianism has become far greater and more dangerous, not only because, yeah, free the potential of AI in France. It's all over the media.
Est
This
devenu bien plus élevé et plus dangereux, non parce que l'intelligence
it's everywhere.
artificielle risquerait de dépasser les humains,
This gives
mais
enormous
parce que son
infectious
usage
power.
modéré risque de faire tomber les humains à son
It could
niveau.
it could bring down humankind to
Et
the
ça,
level of its of
j'entends assez peu,
AI, which
malheureusement,
is the
parce que
biggest
les
danger.
humains sont dans cette tendance et les jeunes en sont infectés.
The young
Elle est
people
partout,
are
l'intelligence
infected by
artificielle.
this.
Sur le tableau
AI
de
is
bord de votre
everywhere.
nouvelle voiture,
On the
sur la fusée
dashboard of your
mesurant
new
la Lune,
car,
dans
on the
laquelle
rocket
émergera de
launch to
votre
the
maison,
moon,
et
on
maintenant
in your
dans la
household
paume de votre main,
appliances, and now in
via
the
les
palm of
applications
your
AI.
hand via AI
Ça lui donne
applications.
un énorme pouvoir
This gives
d'infection
it enormous
lorsqu'elle tombe dans ces
infectious
mauvaises mains.
power when it falls into the wrong hands.
C'est devenu un élément
It has
essentiel de nos
become
vies.
an integral part of our lives.
Associé au monde des écrans
Combined
et des
with the
images,
world of
il
screens
est
and
utilisé
images,
pour créer des
it is
addictions.
used to create addictions.
Sur les marchés
In
financiers,
the financial
là depuis
markets,
plusieurs
it has
années,
fueled a
stimulé une
frenzied
hausse
search
démentielle
for
ne
several years,
correspondant plus du tout aux
completely
besoins physiques des
disconnected from
valeurs.
the physical
Vous voyez
reality
les
of
produits
values.
financiers dérivés. Maintenant, il y a l'intelligence artificielle qui booste toute spéculation. Elle pousse les
It
opérateurs
pushes
à opérer
market
tous dans le même
participants
sens, que ce soit
to
pour le
all
rendement
move in the
immédiat
same directions,
ou le
whether
profit
for the
prolongé,
value
encourageant la cupidité
of
des plus forts
cryptocurrencies
et
or
des
stock
plus
markets,
riches,
encouraging the
la
greed
cupidité aussi
of
des
the
autres qui
strongest and
veulent
richest
parier sur les
with
cryptos,
no connection to the
que ce
real
soit au Mexique, en Argentine,
physical economy,
même en Russie ou en Chine, et
be
c'est
it in
partout en France
Mexico,
aussi,
in Argentina, in Russia,
sans
or in
lien
France.
aucun avec
There
l'économie
is
physique,
no
l'économie réelle.
connection to the real
Ainsi, il est
physical
logiquement
economy.
certain
Thus,
qu'un
it
jour,
is logically certain that
l'accumulation
one
d'ordres
day
à la baisse
the
éclatera.
accumulation of short
Tous
orders
les
will
algorithmes
explode
s'efforçant de
as
garantir
all
la valorisation
algorithms
de la même
strive to
façon
guarantee positions
à
in
la
the same
hausse
way.
comme se retournant à la baisse. Il s'agira fatalement d'une baisse en
This
chute
will
libre,
inevitably
les
be a
plus
free
puissants
fall,
quittant le Titanic et
with
les
the
premiers
most powerful
au
leaving the
détriment de tout le
Titanic
monde.
first, to the
Les écrans
detriment
de
of the
l'IA
vast
s'étant
majority.
déjà gavés de tous les
Furthermore, since
algorithmes
AI has
possibles,
already gorged
doit
itself on
engendrer pour
every
son propre
possible
usage
algorithm, it
un
must
chien
generate
chassant
more for
plus
its
que
own
l'homme.
use, like a
Pire
dog
encore,
chasing
son propre
its tail.
financement est devenu circulaire.
Even worse, its own
Des
funding has
centaines de
become
milliards de dollars
circular,
circulant en
with
circulation.
hundreds of billions
Je
of
te
dollars
prête,
circulating in a closed
j'investis chez
loop.
toi,
I lend you
j'achète
money
les produits
or
ou je
invest
te
in
loue
your
les
company so
services.
that you
Et nous
buy my
tous
products
puissions opérer
or
sur
rent
les
my
crypto-monnaies
services,
qui
and so that
constituent
we
la
can
valeur
all
ajoutée des
operate on the
stablecoins, sur dollars et
cryptocurrencies which
euros
along
américains
with the new
Genius,
dollar-backed
inversement à la fois de
stablecoins
privatisation
introduced by the
et
Genius
d'affection du
Law
dollar. Il provoquera encore plus le détachement
constitute an
commercial
instrument for
des
both the
États de l'Union européenne
privatization and the
et
corruption of the
Vega
dollar.
avec les
This will
principes
further
et les
detach
conditions de
the
son
markets from
effondrement.
the real economy and, along
Déjà,
with
certains
everything
se
else,
posent la
create the
question.
conditions for its collapse.
Ne trouvez-vous pas étrange
Some are already
que,
asking, don't you
alors que
find
le
it
discours
strange that
dominant
while the
est que le
prevailing
temps de
narrative
l'informatique est
is
infini
that the demand
et que
for
tout sera
computing
mieux pour
is
la meilleure dans le
infinite
monde virtuel
and that
possible,
everything will be for the best in the best of all
nous vendront
possible
continuer
virtual
de
worlds?
subventionner leurs clients.
Well, vendors
C'est comme un
continue to
engin,
subsidize their customers.
plus il
It's
a
like a
besoin de pression,
machine that the further
et
it
plus
goes, the
il
more
augmente.
fuel it needs and the more losses
Les
it
militaires
incurs. In
recourent à
the military,
l'intelligence
the use of
artificielle, mais
AI
bien pire, selon
poses in a
l'OFIE,
far worse
et
form
la
the
France
same
en fait
challenge
partie.
as in
En
1962
1983,
and 1983.
que nos trois courageux
With our
amis,
three courageous friends
mariés intellectuellement avec eux, que nos trois courageux amis ont su relever,
successfully met
les deux Russes et l'Américain.
the two
La
Russians and
prochaine
the
fois,
American.
avec
Next
des
time,
adultes qui, dès l'enfance
with
et
adults who
l'adolescence,
have been
ont été
processed
propulsés
by
par
AI
l'intelligence
since
artificielle,
childhood and adolescence,
auraient-ils le même sang-froid?
would they be able
Prendront-ils
to
en
have the
compte
same
que c'est le sort de
cold
l'humanité qui est en
bloodedness?
jeu?
Will they
Or,
consider that the fate of
l'intelligence
humanity is
artificielle est
at
devenue le
stake?
soutien émotionnel
Today,
naturel de
AI
plus
has
d'un
to
tiers des jeunes
become the
Américains.
usual emotional support for more than a third of young Americans
Et elle
and
prend
place
tellement de
into their
pouvoir pour
hands,
les rendre
making
addictifs.
them addicted
Addictifs aux paris financiers,
at the price of money
aux jeux vidéo,
on video games,
à la pornographie.
on
Ça vous crée
pornography,
un homme abaissé.
which
Nous sommes
creates
dans une
a
société,
degraded
vous
man
devez l'apercevoir, où on crée des hommes
who
abaissés
who
mais en
believes
croyant
himself
qu'il serait
enhanced
augmenté grâce à des chatbox adaptés. Chatbox adaptés à la parole. Et à quelle parole? Et on va plus loin. À la parole et aux tics verbaux
thanks to
des défunts.
chatbots adapted to the speech and verbal tics of the deceased, can even have the impression of
On croit
speaking
même
to them.
donner l'impression de leur
This
parler.
commerce with death is
Le
obscene
commerce avec la mort est obscène et mortel.
and mortal.
Il faut bien voir dans quelle pente
We
on
have
est
to
engagé.
see which
Je ne sais
direction
pas si
things
vous
are
avez
going.
déjà réalisé tout cela.
I don't know if you
Cette
fully grasp all
possibilité
of this,
qui est donnée à
the
tous de
possibility of
participer à la destruction du monde
participating in the
en jouant
destruction
au
of the
grand
world
jeu, au grand
is
jeu de
playing the great
l'intelligence
military
artificielle
financial
et du
game.
militaro-financier. Dans ce monde où
In
les
this
systèmes
world where
d'IA
AI,
GPT
GPT
se
systems
sont,
have,
comme ils disent,
as they say,
déjà
already
invités au
invited
processus de
themselves
guerre
into the
nucléaire.
processes of nucléaire war,
Nous savons, depuis les
we
pierres de
know
Bola
since the
dans le Moyen
time of
siècle
our
et
distant
avant,
ancestors,
dans le siècle
Bolas,
lointain, nous savons qu'une fois
that once
inventées,
invented,
les technologies militaires ont
military
toujours été
technologies
utilisées.
have
Cette
always
fois, pour
ended
continuer notre aventure sur Terre
being
ou
used.
ailleurs,
This time to
il est temps
continue
de faire
our
autrement.
adventure on Earth or
En
elsewhere,
écoutant les
it's
sages
time to
paroles
do
de
things
Nicolas LaRouche,
differently
de Lino
by
LaRouche
heeding the
et de la
wise words
puissance
of
du vivant et
Nicolas
du
of
penseur.
Cusa, Lino LaRouche,
Nicolas,
and the power of life and thought.
ici vous avez Nicolas et son
Here
frère.
you have Nicolas, right under the cross,
Toute leur humilité créatrice.
with their
C'est pourquoi, face à ce risque
creative
imminent de basculement,
humility.
l'intervention du pape Léon XIV, ce
This is why,
référent de
faced
notre
with this
vieillesse,
imminent risk of
qui
collapse, the
bafouille sur
intervention
la
of
place
Pope
Saint-Pierre de Rome,
Leo
revêt une
XIV, referring
importance
to Nicholas of Cusa
fondamentale.
before the crowd in St.
Ce sont
Peter's
les
Square
fondements
in
pour
Rome,
changer
is
la
of
manière de penser,
fundamental importance.
qui nous
It
permettront
lays the
d'échapper
groundwork
au grand
for a
jeu
change
mortel
in
en cours.
thinking that will
Il est
allow us to
évident
escape
pour
the
tous ceux
deadly
qui nous
great game
connaissent qu'il y
currently
a une
underway.
coïncidence
It is
cette fois
obvious to all
déplacée
who
vers
know
l'opposé
us
entre
that
ce qu'a
there
dit
is
le
a
pape à propos
coincidence,
du jubilé
which this
et
time is
les
not
écrits d'El
of
Gazebo de la
opposites,
Rouche
between what
depuis
the
plus de
Pope said
40 ans.
about the Jubilee and the writings of Helga
L'Institut
Zepp-LaRouche
Schiller
over
a
the
préparé un
past
document
40
qui établit
years. The Schiller
l'importance
Institute has
fondamentale de cet
prepared
événement,
a document that
pourvu que nous le
establishes
fassions
the
rayonner partout
fundamental
dans le monde.
importance of this event, provided we amplify its message.
Dans un message très
In the
émouvant adressé à
deeply
l'occasion
moving message
de la
delivered
dernière réunion de la
at the
Commission
last meeting
internationale
of
pour la
the
paix,
International Peace
Father
Coalition,
Harry Burry,
Father
militant
Harry
historique de
Burry,
la
a
paix et de la
longtime
non-violence,
advocate
proche de
for
Maria-Thérèse
peace and
d'Avila,
nonviolence
Mère
and a
Thérèse,
close associate of
a
Mother
souligné que
Teresa,
chacun d'entre nous a le
emphasized that
pouvoir
each
de
of us
changer les
has the
choses et
power
de
to
les rendre
change
meilleures
things for the
à
better
un niveau plus élevé.
on a higher
Il
level.
a déclaré que
He
Nicolas of
stated
Cusa
that
méritait
Nicholas of
d'être
Cusa
canonisé et
deserved to
béatifié
be
par une
canonized by
église qu'il a
a
jusqu'à
church
maintenant
that has
rejetée ou ignorée,
hitherto
et que
rejected
Lino
or
Larouche
ignored
devait
him,
être
and that Lino
également
LaRouche should be
réhabilité aux
similarly
États-Unis.
exonerated
Il
in the
est
United
essentiel qu'une
States.
telle
It
voix
is
s'élève
essential
pour
that
incarner
such a
pleinement
voice
l'être
be
humain
raised to embody the
et
idea that
rendre le bien
humanity
et le
is
mal, soi-disant
inherently
ennemis
good
géopolitiques
and that
s'affrontant
good and
sans
evil are
foi
not like
dans le
two
monde,
geopolitical
et le
enemies
mal ne
clashing in the
pouvant
world,
apparaître qu'en l'absence de
but
bien.
rather that evil can only
C'est dans la
arise in the
jonction.
absence of good.
Engageons-nous
It is
en
in this
politique
context that I
sur
condemn
la
in
chaîne de
our
l'histoire
country
pour faire le
the
bien. Et
complacency
c'est un défi aujourd'hui dans
of
les
those
conditions que
who
je vois.
advocate uniting
Ce n'est
all
pas en
right
dehors de
wing
cela que je
factions
condamne chez nous la
in
complaisance
this
des adeptes de l'union
destructive
de toutes les droites
great game.
pour entrer dans ce grand jeu destructeur. Ils ne mesurent peut-être pas ce
They
qu'ils
may
font,
not
mais
realize
ils le
what
font.
they are doing,
Ce sont
but
Pierre-Édouard
they are
Sterrin
doing it.
et Vincent
These
Bolloré,
are the French
taguant le
billionaires
catholicisme
Pierre-Edouard Sterrin
avec
and
un culte
Vincent
de
Bolloré
crypto-monnaie
branding
le mois
their
dernier au
Catholicism
sommet
with
des
a cult
libertés,
of
avec le
cryptocurrencies,
stand d'un Pierre
as seen
Noisa
last
et de
June at the
Flamanville.
Summit of Freedoms with a stand
Ce sont
run
Marine
by
Le Pen et
Pierre
Jordan
Noisa.
Bardella à Flamanville,
These are Marine Le Pen and
ville
Jordan Bardella in
un
Flamanville,
défi qui m'est cher parce que le maire m'a toujours
uh,
soutenu et c'est là
where the
que j'ai
mayor has
développé
been a
ma
long-time
carrière.
supporter of
Ce sont
ours.
Marine Le Pen et Jordan Bardella à Flamanville,
Marine Le Pen and
prônant la
Bardella
fourniture de
in
l'électricité
Flamanville,
du nucléaire pour booster le
advocating for the use
Bitcoin.
of nuclear power to
Ou
boost
pire
the
encore,
Bitcoin,
Éric Ciotti,
or Eric
présentant une
Ciotti
proposition de loi pour injecter
presenting
les
a bill
crypto-monnaies dans l'économie et
to
créer une
inject
réserve nationale de
cryptocurrencies
Bitcoin
into the economy
dans le
and create
sillage des
a
États-Unis.
national Bitcoin reserve following the lead
Voilà
of
déjà
the United
Trump
States.
qui veut, sans doute
And here is
sincèrement,
Donald
être
Trump,
un homme de paix.
who
Mais en
undoubtedly
bâtissant
sincerely
sur le
wants to
sable
be a man
mouvant
of
des
peace, but is
crypto-monnaies,
building
il se
it
rend
on the
justement prisonnier.
quicksand of
Voilà, Trump trouve
cryptocurrencies
ici des adeptes
and
complaisants.
his own
On
personal
pourrait dire
enrichment.
que c'est vis-à-vis
and who finds willing followers here. I should say that in the front of the real players of this French right wing stoops in front of the depraved billionaires who surround Trump and speculate on everything, the same ones that push him to support genocidal policies of Netanyahu and his messianic thugs. All of this is the antithesis of true sovereignty. They really don't care. France and the United States share the common trait of having no budget, a parliamentary gridlock here, a shutdown there, with parties incapable of prioritizing the national interest and that of their people over their own, and more obsessed, in our case, with the presidential election than with the risk of war and the collapse of a country. They all want, like Icarus, to fly towards the sun, towards the sun of power with existing technologies. Feather and wax wings yesterday. That's what happened to Icar. Bruegel's painting. They want to fly towards the sun of power, but with the existing technologies, feather and wax. Yesterday in IA and cryptocurrencies today. This is how the left behaves, as if with the wings of anti, it could fulfill its social promises without any real policy of creation, hating those it proclaims its enemies and even the people if they vote the wrong way. To change any person, you must receive each human being with a beautiful face. Lino LaRouche's triple curve, shown here, clearly shows where the Western economy is headed: crash and war to save its possession of resources that its policy of monetary and military runaway no longer makes it capable of generating. You see the curve of the emission of currency is boosting the financial aggregates, financial markets which have nothing to do with real economy, while the real physical economy is collapsing and going down, as you can see in the lower curve. That's why we really have to change. To conclude, I would say how beautiful the world would be, on the contrary, with great projects like the Peace Tunnel under the Bering Strait and its development corridors, the water and energy lungs of Lake Chad and the Inga dams in Africa, the Kra Canal in Asia, the Messina Bridge between mainland Italy and Sicily, our oasis plan for all of Southwest Asia. All these projects, not based on the lowest denominator or even the highest multiple, but on the convergence of opposites there, engendering what is truly creation, something that does not yet exist, but which we must ensure comes into being, as Leo XIV said, with hope and perseverance. Finally, let us look with interest at what Chinese scientists, engineers, and builders have accomplished in 30 years for their country and their people. The Chinese society is a society of engineers. There was another one, which was called France, and which we have abandoned. France was beautiful. If we saw its inventors, people like engineer Jean Bartin, inventor of the aérotrain, Jean Robier, who invented lasers for medicine and nuclear power, the Laboulaye brothers, who were working with the sculptor Bartholdi in building the Statue of Liberty, based on the same principles of material resistance as those of the Garabie Viaduct and the Eiffel Tower. Eugène Freycinet, the inventor of pre-stressed concrete, and even more so the contributions of Colbert's Academy of Sciences and the École Polytechnique of Gaspard Monge and Lazare Carnot.
Une partie de notre site qui est celui de notre France.
This is now all on show, and you can see in the new page of our website called Our France. There's no way back to the past, but we must create it in the image of those who created it. Consider the social security system of Pierre Laroque and Ambroise Croizat, the Gaullists and the communists, both members of the resistance. Yet another example of the convergence of opposites. Today, more than ever, we have the means to elevate all human beings to the dignity of humankind, as Laroque and Croizat envisioned. While their work is gradually falling victim to financial predators who have disrupted our development momentum. I have all the documents of the social security, which is destroying dozens of dispositions of our social security system. Are we going to allow all these contributions to be wiped out? Are we going to sink into the selfish rejection of the other under the pretext that they are migrants, instead of contributing to the development of our country so that they are not forced to leave and we are not forced to welcome them here, taking our share of all the world's misery? We French people and human beings can no longer tolerate the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the drownings in the Mediterranean and the English Channel. Borders are necessary, essential, but they cannot be a wall or a sieve. Are we, for example, going to let French New Caledonia drift by being incapable of decolonizing it within the Republic? The real problem with schools, hospitals, and housing is that we have allowed other priorities to be dictated to us, adopting to a global market and to a Europe that has become destructive since the Single European Act of 1986 created the conditions for the loss of our sovereignty. We, with our party, Solidarité et Progrès, fought against it, while many of today's sovereignists were either not yet born or were comfortably ensconced within the institutions. The absolute priority is to restore our sovereignty, but to do so, we must fight alongside those who defend theirs, convinced that it is our pursuit of excellence that will enable us to be accepted, to succeed, and be a source of inspiration. A catalyzer is a very small thing. We have to be this catalyzer for France. France has to be this catalyzer for the world. There will be this change of orientation by changing our ways of thinking for our children and grandchildren, for which they can live a better life. I began by quoting Jaurès, and I will end, surprising some and even including myself, by quoting Lamartine. The role of poetry, the role of poetry is to constantly call humanity forward, showing him utopias, imaginary republics, and cities of God, inspiring society with the courage to reach them. At the entrance, you will see, you probably saw already, and we ask you to give your support. We equip our minds to explore the unknown and mobilize. There's also my 2017 program, France with the Eyes of the Future, which remains entirely relevant for those who wish to explore its various aspects, because what has been done, and especially what has not been done during Macron's presidency, has unfortunately not rendered it obsolete. There's especially a document which each of you have to buy, which is called Who Was Really Lyndon LaRouche. You will have a sense of history, what happened in history, which we want to revive by the rehabilitation or exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche. Equip yourself to commit wholeheartedly, because if we do not mobilize more than ever before, the alternative is a final collapse, financial collapse, dragging down the Western economy, and us with it, and a war leading to our annihilation. In advance, I thank you for what you are going to do. A hard work can overcome everything. The passion for work, LaRouche said, was the secret of his accomplishment. Have confidence.
Merci beaucoup, Jacques. Alors,
Thank you, Jacques Cheminade.
Pour les questions, avant de passer au prochain intervenant, on va prendre deux questions de la salle.
Two questions from the room. If some of you go ahead.
Si on a, sinon on enchaîne. Oui, il y a une question.
There's one question here.
Merci. Bonjour Jacques. Lorsque, c'est une question un peu franco-française, désolé, mais lorsque
this is more a Franco-French question. When you made the choice to present yourself to the presidential elections, for the system, you were not considered nothing. Why did the oligarchy attack you while you were not part of the system and you were considered to be a nothing?
Oui, alors la première chose, c'est que l'oligarchie,
so the first answer is the people which are in place, they don't support somebody they don't know. I was the unknown figure, the relatively unknown figure, which was rebelling against the system, but with the capacity I did all these very high-level schools, so I could have been completely successful in the system, and I was not going into the system. What Jacques Robert, the judge of the Constitutional Court, underlined that I have been the scapegoat. The question that was asked at Roland Dumas, who was the president of the Constitutional Council, two journalists asked him the question, which asked, why? Why did you validate the campaign count of Edouard Balladur, which was in a campaign which was the dirtiest and lots of dirty money in the 1995 campaign? Roland Dumas said, but we didn't know. We had not the information. But there were millions of dirty cash put on his bank account. But then Dumas said, if we had rejected the campaign count of Balladur, we also had to not validate that one of Chirac, who was already president. But if Chirac was not validated, then the Republic would have collapsed. So we, Roland Dumas and the Constitutional Council, we have saved the Republic. We saved the Republic by by cheating. Then there was a journalist called Christophe Barbier.
Jacques Cheminade.
Said, how about Jacques Cheminade? Why did you invalidate it? And Dumas then said, Balladur and Chirac they played it smart.
Cheminade a été plutôt maladroit.
Well, Cheminade was maladresse. He was unsmart. So when this becomes the criteria of the highest level of the constitutional court, the jurisdiction, it is revealing not just on me, but on the entire system. And this Jacques Robert said that Cheminade was an unknown, a troublemaker. On top of that, I was saying that the financial system would collapse in the next decade. And this crisis happened in 2007, 2008. In 2007, 2008. So my credibility had to be destroyed. In the United States, there is the Freedom of Information Act, which allows to obtain information about what the authorities have been reporting on you. Our American friends did a big effort through this procedure and one of the letters, which was declassified from the FBI, who gave the instructions in Bonn and Rome and Paris, that they should hurt this campaign, the campaign of Cheminade, because he was close to LaRouche. This gives you an idea. Well, in terms of number of militants, with very few party members, with the power of ideas and commitment, the power of ideas. The oligarchy reacts as an Aristotelian machine. You all should come tomorrow to our study groups. You have to become yourself agents of change. And that's the issue of these days of discussion. The truth is alive. We are the imago viva Dei. We're in the living image of God. You have to be alive because you're a human being. You're not thinking like Aristotle. You think about the future, which should be better, possible, and you fight for it, and you believe it. I saw this spirit. I saw this. I saw this among people from the suburbs, which are here in the room.
So we have to give to the people like I did today. Maybe you thought it was too philosophical. And no, it's not. It is precisely that which is needed. And then each one has to take the decision to act and be confident And this is a problem. People are not confident in themselves. We have to give them back this confidence. And for the first time, when I met Lyndon LaRouche, he gave me this confidence. I had things in me already. I was angry about the society, but then I saw there is something here. There is maybe something possible to do a better world. And what is on me, maybe I can enact it by act, politically. And I continue to engage to be active then. And don't think that people which are in an organization are perfect, that people which are acting are perfect. But you have to act to do even better than them. Because if you don't act, this is terrible. We have the time for another question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Cheminade.
Hello, Mr. Cheminade.
Vous m'entendez? Voilà. Bonjour, Monsieur Cheminade. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello, everybody.
Par rapport à la question précédente, je voulais juste ajouter
about the question just asked, the first one, what was made to you was also made to Assolino and to LFE also. And I have a question about crypto money. It's many years that I am in the streets against the wars in Africa, Yugoslavia, in the Arab world, the wars, embargo in Latino America. And then I came to the conclusion that the problem is the dollar, petrodollar, and all of this. In Algeria, the first Daesh laboratory is GIA.
Ça n'a pas marché, ça a fait beaucoup de dégâts. Par rapport à la crypto,
made many problems. And about crypto, I know that there is many Africans today, and many Africans that invest in crypto. And I studied crypto myself, and I think it's a counter power against the dollar, and I think it's good. What do you think about it?
La crypto, c'est la nouvelle arme.
Crypto, this is the new arm, a new weapon of the dollar. This one of the new problem, one of the problem of LFE, the left-wing party in France of Mélenchon, I think, is that they are not Marxist. Marx was just good on economy on something, but he separated economy and morality. And doing this, he went to conclusions which are not really mobilizing for something positive. I come back to the question of crypto. The crypto were made at the beginning, and the Bitcoin also, by people which made a value between the energy which had to be spent and the Bitcoin. Was 0.004. There was a reference. There was a limit fixed 21 billion, I think. So there was an insurance of the Bitcoin that it will replace the gold because there is a limit. But this was seen as just to try something. But then there was many crypto. There is thousands of crypto today with private people, and with Genius, what they decided in the United States with this law. It's a law which gives with the stable coins, gives the stable coins and the Federal Reserve. It's the central bank, but it's not a national bank, but it's with private interest, but it's with wars now. It's in fact it goes on this to make it worse even. Stable coin is 1 for 1 hour, and with the dollar is it's with the Federal Reserve there is a guarantee, and with the blockchain there is a possibility of communication between the crypto and the dollar itself. And it's what Scott Bessent said different time. He said, with this we're going to bring the whole dollar of the whole world on the control of some private interest in United States, billionaires. It is people around Trump, no illusions to have. But what is this? It's all the people of Silicon Valley, of the tech. It's the technology, without the discovery spirit, without its only application of technology. They try to military applications, they try to defend this value, which is not the American dollar today, it's the dollar of their power, their financial power. And what I attacked when I was in 2007 candidate, the attack against the financial fascism. We have to see the difference between this with the state crypto. State crypto, as Chinese have it, others have it. It's a way to make the money flow, to orient. It's needed. It can be good if you orient them on the productive economy. Only if you do this. Chinese and others did it. This is important. This is where you have to see what is good or no. You or not. You have to understand. This is what we fight for, people to be able to understand things and act. And Attali stated very clearly. He said, what will happen is that some countries, and I think Indonesia, for example, Nigeria, India, these countries will lost the control of their money. This will make the money a multinational money linked to the dollar. And many people doesn't understand this, doesn't see the link of the application of artificial intelligence also. It's more important, I thought today, to make a political program. I did not went on all details. I detailed a lot on 2017 and on my different election campaigns. I tried to give this morning, in the time I had, all what I could give to you. And we have here two speeches of LaRouche, who was truly Lyndon LaRouche. It's important to show it. He went 5 years in prison in the United States. I was in Paris with Helga Zepp LaRouche, when I learned he was liberated. It's here that we have to change the way of thinking. It's not going in the sky. We have to elevate your emotions. It's why we are called Schiller Institute, because Schiller said, when you have to educate your emotions, then you succeed, act on the level you need to intervene on the world. And talk about the French Revolution. It's important to see the history. He said there was a problem. Schiller was totally for at first for the French Revolution, but we have to change the world. But he said we have the sauvage, wild man, which made violence, and this is not the way to do. And there is even worse. It's the barbary. Those who make barbary. It's those who think and make their systems and think it's better of everything else. And they say we have to do it anyway, and all others who don't agree, we're gonna eliminate them. And with this, we go to chaos. And there is dialogues of Lessing in Germany about the nature of power. It's very important today. What he say, one say we have to make a better system. We will discuss. We will succeed to have a better system. And we have to think of what seems good and inspire. And people being inspired, there will be some things coming. I think that we need, this is more important to inspire people, and then they're gonna succeed, find solutions. We're gonna continue, we're gonna have other questions at the end. We're gonna now invite our candidate in front for the legislative elections position 3. I've got
Donc on a actuellement 6 candidatures. Donc on a Benoît Odile.
We've got 6 Benoît Odile, 5 House of Perth, Il Mojon, which is the 10th circumscription of French from the League abroad. Jean-François Griot-Desfontaines in the first circumscription of Garonne in the south of France. Gérard Lien in the second circumscription.
Et Rémi Lebrun, qui est donc ici sur votre...
On the southeast of France. Rémi Lebrun, now also in the sixth circumscription of Val d'Oise in the north of Paris, and me, which is a candidate, the circumscription in the east of Paris, northeast, Pantin and Aubervilliers, in the suburb of Paris. So we're going to have 2 candidates which are going to come speaking. Odile Mojon first, for 5 minutes.
Donc, qui est candidate dans la 10e circonscription des Français.
Candidate in the 10th circumscription of the French abroad. And she's gonna explain why. Thank you. Hello. I say hello to all people which are speaking online, because also there is many people speaking, listening here from Africa, and also from circumscriptions, countries which I am candidate, where French abroad living in these countries vote. It's not small, as you can see. It's part of the world very interesting, because it's all this part of the world which is part of the world majority, as we say today, correctly.
C'est très disparate d'une certaine manière. Ça a été fait de cette manière-là pour des raisons administratives, puisque normalement, dans chaque circonscription, il faut qu'il y ait environ...
different, depending on the place of the French living.
Plus de Français à l'étranger qui sont présents, évidemment, est plus petite. Là, c'est des circonscriptions où les Français de l'étranger sont moins représentés. En tout cas, je m'adresse à ceux qui nous écoutent, qui sont dans ces circonscriptions-là, qui soient Français sur place, Français de l'étranger vivant dans ces circonscriptions, ou qui soient des Africains de ces différents pays ou du Moyen-Orient. Effectivement, de ne pas hésiter à me contacter, parce qu'il y a tout un travail à faire. Il y a un travail à faire en France pour justement donner ce sens de ce qu'est cette majorité.
So we give to people what is the sense of what is this world majority.
Vous voyez, c'est 49 pays. Donc c'est quand même assez impressionnant. Vous avez le nombre aussi.
It's quite impressive how many people how many countries, how many we see there, how many people are voting there.
Je me présenterai pour les élections législatives.
It's not the first time that I will be candidate.
C'est vraiment le pont, en réalité,
entre la France a bridge between France and this world majority. It's a bridge between France and the BRICS, because different countries of this are in the BRICS. And this is a way, this is what I want to do, to make change the French exterior French policy. It is an objective which I give to me.
Et même en réalité totalement à côté de la plaque. Et il y a vraiment un travail absolument énorme à faire.
There is something very important to do about this.
Je m'en suis rendu compte. Beaucoup de sympathie.
I saw that there is a lot of sympathy still, quite surprisingly, we could say.
Intervenir très rapidement. Donc voilà, ça, ce sont les grands axes de la raison.
Important things important reason why I am engaged there. When I started to be candidate, I had some people good reactions. For example, French people in Madagascar for very different reasons. Also, probably in Dubai, also in Lebanon, where there is a French community, and you see it's a big region.
Un enjeu stratégique majeur.
There is a strategic importance of these regions. This gives big possibilities. And also, this is countries where there is wars in Middle East, in Sudan, in Congo, in Gaza. And because this is, and also many of these countries are with big raw materials, and this is a reason also why there is these wars. And we have now this new paradigm. We have a change of the paradigm. So we have to send the message that it is time to change the way of doing and to say to the others, to this global majority, that we are ready to work with them hand in hand with the planetary South. I will continue with the same idea. Thank you very much.
On a un autre candidat qui va parler,
we
donc
have
c'est Benoît Odile.
Another candidate which will speak now from the 5th circumscription of Essonne, in the south of Paris, scientific zone.
Bonjour à tous.
Hello, all of you. Thank you for being here this morning. This 5th circumscription of Essonne, it's a more modest, smaller circumscription.
Et on est sur un pôle
60,000 electors. It's a scientific pole, the pole of Paris-Saclay. It's very interesting. A lot of debates about science, about how we can develop the French industry. It's a very fun there to do campaigning, and sure, I need help.
Je vous invite, si jamais vous êtes convaincu par mon petit texte, de me rejoindre. Je fais beaucoup de déploiements.
I prepared a small text, and if you are convinced by my small text, you can come to campaign with me. What I want to do is to make together the French, liberate France of oligarchy, because we cannot grow in an oligarchy. We cannot have a family in an oligarchy. It's difficult to profit to what we do with our work is difficult. Live in good health, old is quite impossible. Make the beauty of your soul living, it's dangerous. And
c'est quand un petit groupe d'individus
Socrates and Plato, an example. And we have some people who use their network and their big money to take the control, and then the fight for truth is not accepted on the public place. We saw it with Jacques Cheminade. To succeed, this little group of people, which is very minority of people, but which have the power, they try to distract the people, to intimidate, to make calumny against people, to divide people on sects and cults, and try to make sure people will not think. They try to create a chaos, permanent chaos. Goscinny and Uderzo had understood this by calling their famous character, they called him detritus. So we doesn't have to have a respect for this oligarchy. They are very bad. They proved it by making France in failing. I'm not afraid about them, but I'm afraid about where they are bringing the world, and I'm afraid that we go on a war with them. This is why I act. I think we are in a turning point, historic turning point. It's why in 2024 I was a candidate to stop the war. It was quite surprising for some people. In 2022, I said I want to take back control and finance of money, because war and finance, this is the two favorite actions, way of of the oligarchy. In 2008, we were on the financial catastrophe. We did not make a consequence of it. In 2022, we were close to go in a war with nuclear power, not understanding what the dynamic in the global south.
Donc, nous avons laissé l'oligarchie détruire notre économie physique, notre industrie,
we let oligarchy destruct our art, our industry, our condition of work, of living good old, and of having a good health. These peoples are very, we don't have to have consideration of them, but we doesn't have to search sometimes enemies out of ourselves. The worst of all would be to doesn't fight against our own immaturity. Leaving away this oligarchy will not be the end. We will still have to debate together of the vital things for France: control, monetary control, how to bring the industry, about to dissolve European Union, how to make peace. The French vote after the dissolution of the National Assembly show something, that no one of the parties which are on the National Assembly can say that he have by himself the solution for the France. So France people oblige politicians to discuss, but they refuse it. There is arrogance. We have to bring back sincerity and curiosity in the center of debates with rigorous methods based on demonstrable facts, but also by letting all ideas of people circulate and making debates. We doesn't have to forbid debate and ideas. Since Yellow Vest, since COVID crisis, the war in Ukraine, we see that people are thinking and want to find solutions. They will have to act. It will be passing by referendum, popular referendum. If two citizens or different citizens will agree on something, they could propose a law together and avoid deputies, avoid the censure of deputies.
Ça ne serait juste pas passé et peut-être qu'on l'aurait même destitué sur le champ. Donc vous voyez qu'il y a quand même des outils démocratiques qui, si on les avait, changeraient radicalement.
This is something that could change things if citizens could bring referendums. But this possibility, RIC called in France, you need for this to have citizens who think creatively, and so we need for it create a confrontation of ideas between people on real facts with clear thinking, and we need to hear the different ideas. This to create polyphony, which at Solidarité Progrès we love. The important things will be debated with jury. We need to have all days debates with citizens, which should be broadcasted at TV without any control. We doesn't have to have anymore the market control the debate. 9 billionaires control the media, most of the media today. Where is freedom of thinking with this? On this more sane start, national popular debate, which I propose, we will go in a better way. I have propositions which you can find on the website of Solidarité et Progrès. This will need debate, national popular debate, before being adopted at the National Assembly. The time where elected officials could impose their idea to the population without asking them, this is at the end. Now, deputy must animate discussions and bring the thinking of people of the country to try to see what is the most close of the beauty and of the true. And so if you are convinced, you should come and campaign with me. Thanks, Benoit. We will have a national popular debate after the different speeches. We are going to go on the international part. I hope you've got all interpretation, because it's going to be in English, he say, for the French people here.
Pour répondre au cri du peuple. Et justement, répondre au cri du peuple, c'est le titre du dernier ouvrage de Jacques Cheminade. Et à partir de 13h, c'est-à-dire après le premier panel, Jacques Cheminade prendra le temps, pour ceux qui l'ont acheté, de discuter avec vous, de signer une dédicace si vous voulez, enfin voilà, de prendre le temps d'échanger.
Will be available for book signing between 1 and 1:45 for those who buy the book. And now we give the word to our French friends, American friends, to a person. We have José Vega, who is a candidate right now, independent candidate for the U.S. Congress for the Bronx in New York. And José, you have the floor. Hello.
Okay, alrighty. Bonjour, mes amis. Comment allez-vous? All right, that's all the French I know. I will speak slow for the translators. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for having this wonderful conference and for giving me an opportunity to share this stage with my colleagues here. First of all, it's always good to know that I come from a process not tied to one single country or people. Whether it's in the Bronx or Paris, Berlin, China, Mexico, or South Africa, I'm proud that many countries from around the world are here joining us today. It's good to remember that I come from an international process that transcends borders. Ideas have allowed us to get to where we are now. Ideas are what is carrying us forward. This is something I've learned through my now single decade and 2 years of being associated with the LaRouche movement. So here I am in France, a beautiful country that I had the pleasure of running around yesterday. I walked by the Louvre and was reminded of the relationship between Samuel Morse and James Fenimore Cooper. Before I get right into that, let me set a scene. It's the 1830s. The United States only has its Constitution at that point for 50 years. The United States is a young country. Compare that to the other contemporary countries at the time that are still being ruled by monarchies. Also, it's a country that understands the responsibility of its citizenry to uphold the republic. And some Americans knew this. Thus enter Samuel Morse, who was an American inventor and painter, and his friend James Fenimore Cooper, who was a famous American author at the time who wrote The Last of the Mohicans, which was in every Parisian bookstore by the time he arrived to Europe in 1826. Samuel Morse and James Fenimore Cooper first met in Washington, D.C. in 1824, when Marquis de Lafayette did his triumphant return from France and did a tour in the United States to aid John Quincy Adams in his election for the presidency of the United States. Morse and Cooper would go on to be friends and would travel Europe together. They both spent a lot of time in Paris. As Cooper would write his routine in his diary, I get up at 8, read the papers, breakfast at 10, sit down to write at 10:30, work till 1, throw off my morning gown, draw on my boots and gloves, take a cane, and go to the Louvre, where I find Morse stuck up on a high working stand, perch myself astraddle of one of the seats, and bore him. What is Cooper referring to? Well, in November of 1829, the 38-year-old American artist Samuel F.B. Morse set sail on a 3,000-mile, 26-day voyage from New York, bound for Paris. He intended to realize the ambition recorded on his passport. His occupation, Morse stated, was historical painter. In Paris, Morse set himself a daunting challenge. By September 1831, visitors to the Louvre observed a curious sight in the high-ceilinged chambers, perched on a tall, movable scaffold of his own contrivance. Morse was completing preliminary studies, outlining 38 paintings hung at various heights on the museum walls, landscapes, religious subjects, and portraits, including Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, as well as works by masters including Titian, Veronese, and Rubens. Working on a 6 by 9 foot canvas, Morse would execute an interior view of a chamber in the Louvre, a space containing his scaled-down survey of works from the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Not even the threat of cholera could slow his pace. On October 6, 1832, Morse embarked for New York. His unfinished painting, Gallery of the Louvre, stowed securely below the deck. The splendid and valuable work, he wrote his brothers, was nearing completion. When Morse unveiled the result of his labors on August 9, 1833 in New York City, however, his hopes for achieving fame and fortune were dashed. The painting commanded only $1,300. He had set the asking price at $2,500. Today, the newly restored work is on view at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Now, amusing as this story is, there is another person who also spent time here in Paris, and that's Edgar Poe. Edgar Poe was another famous author in the United States, contemporaneous with people like James Fenimore Cooper. Now, you may know the famous author Alexander Dumas. Well, Dumas wrote in his diary his meeting that he had with Edgar Poe. He writes, "It was about the year 1832. One day, a young American presented himself at my house with an introduction from his fellow countryman, the famous novelist Fenimore Cooper. Needless to say, I welcomed him with open arms. His name was Edgar Poe. From the outset, I realized that I had to deal with a remarkable man. 2 or 3 remarks which he had made on my furniture, the things I had about me, the way my articles of everyday use were strewn about the room, and on my moral and intellectual characteristics, impressed me with their accuracy and truth. On the very first day of our acquaintance, I freely proffered him my friendship and asked for his. He must certainly have entertained me for a sympathy similar to that I felt for him, for he held out his hand to me, and the understanding between us was instantaneous and complete." Now, why are these people here? Why are there Americans in Europe while the United States is still being formed? What is happening in the world at the time? Well, all the people that I mentioned did not view themselves as limited to a single time period, but understood their roles as historical individuals. They came to France to get the best of the culture and the country to bring back to what was at the time a very young country, because they understood they needed to build a culture and a society of the best of what every culture had to offer. I think about that painting that Samuel Morse made and how the original asking price was $2,500. But the worth of that painting is not monetary. It's a footprint of the alliance that Lafayette, Cooper, Samuel Morse, Washington Irving, and Edgar Poe, and others sometimes referred to as the Society of Cincinnatus. And I'm inspired by this idea, because as I see the world now, I see the people in this room, I realized that we don't need parties or factions, but a new school of Athens through which we can pull the best ideas of the past into dialogue with the new generations to revive the best in culture for today. This is what the Americans coming to Paris understood. And this is what I understand as well. And so I hope to learn a lot in being here and learning from all of you, my fellow colleagues, many of whom I am meeting for the first time, to take these ideas back to the United States as we build our International School of Athens. So, merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Et donc, pour terminer ce premier panel, donc on va donner la parole à Diane Sare, qui nous vient également des États-Unis, qui a été candidate récemment au Sénat américain dans l'État de New York, et peut-être, sait-on jamais, future candidate à l'élection présidentielle américaine, hein, sait-on jamais. Donc, Diane Sare, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you, Jacques, for that very insightful speech. I think I'm going to start with what just happened in New York City in the mayoral election, because I think some of you might be interested in that. And a friend of mine showed me what the German newspapers had to say about it, which was wildly inaccurate, and I don't know what they're saying in France. So as some of you may remember, this past July, I gave a speech in Berlin where I said that the children of Gaza would save the United States. And I'm sticking to that. I did not say Zoran Mamdani will save the United States, just to be clear. There is a difference. The difference is the poetical principle which moves us. I don't know what Mr. Mamdani plans to do, and even if he is brilliantly successful, he is the mayor of a city, not the president of the United States. But there is a poetic impulse which moves the hearts of humanity as a whole, and the election of Mamdani is a reflection of that. A 34-year-old Muslim immigrant born in Uganda, parents from India, self-proclaimed democratic socialist, won an election for an office, mayor of New York City, which is seen as a stepping stone to the US presidency, for which he is not eligible, not being born in the United States. But nonetheless, this is one of the most powerful offices in the United States. The city of New York has a budget of $115 billion, which is greater than that of 100 nations. So how did this occur? What happened is that using October 7th, 2023 as a pretext, the murderous Netanyahu regime and his British handlers, with massive funding and weapons from the United States, began a war of annihilation against the impoverished civilian population of Palestine. New York is a city of immigrants. Over 150 languages are spoken in Queens. Since the Palestinian people have been forced to leave their homes for many years now, there are many Palestinians all over the world. They talk to people, they use social media, they documented the monstrous crimes being committed against children and other unnamed, helpless people. And millions of Americans responded, particularly young people, college students who said, "I don't want my government involved in a genocide. I am responsible for my government. I am responsible for where my university spends its money, what it's invested in, and universities nowadays are like giant hedge funds. I'm going to use my power as a citizen in a republic, as a student at an educational institution, to make my voice heard. So, thousands of students filled the streets of New York and occupied their campuses. The Zionist lobby, which is closely intertwined with Wall Street and big tech, think Jeffrey Epstein, went berserk. They started arresting people and canceling their degrees. That was brilliant. According to Norm Finkelstein, a Jewish author and peace activist, both of whose parents were in concentration camps, he predicted that the campus movement would die over the summer because he said the students will go home and their parents will say, I spent $350,000 for you to get a degree, and you are not going to waste that money. So sure enough, they came back, and the campus movement was crushed. We have now in New York a very Christian Zionist fascist Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik, running for governor. She chaired the committee on the campuses in the Congress to fire college presidents who were soft on anti-Semitism, which is really anti-genocide. And then, of course, after President Trump was elected, and by the way, many Muslims in the United States voted for Donald Trump because there was no way they could possibly vote for Joe Biden and Kamalala, as we call her. And so after that, you had people protesting genocide, or people who even wrote editorials who were in the United States legally with a green card getting arrested and threatened with deportation. So again, the campus movement was squashed, but the electoral process still existed. In 2024, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, which should be forced to register as a foreign lobby group, spent hundreds of millions of dollars defeating anti-genocide members of Congress. This made Americans angry, including many Trump supporters who thought they were voting for America first, but they found out it seemed to be Israel first. In the United States, for your information, it is fine to burn an American flag under freedom of speech, but if you touch an Israeli flag, you will go to jail, because that is anti-Semitism. There is also a revolt against AIPAC among President Trump's base, the MAGA loyalists. So the Republican Jewish coalition spent 3 days in Las Vegas denouncing Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene as anti-Semites who are a threat to the conservative movement. There is a huge brawl within the Heritage Foundation because its president, Kevin Roberts, refused to distance himself from Tucker Carlson. Calling out a genocide is not anti-Semitic. Columbia University is on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in a neighborhood which is very Jewish. I petitioned there when I was getting on the ballot. I had a ceasefire button on my shirt, and one person told me that the synagogues on the Upper West Side at that time were split 50-50 for a ceasefire. Now, apparently, the Jewish population in the United States, 60% of them believe that Netanyahu is committing war crimes. 40% of them believe that Israel is committing genocide. At least 33% of Jewish New York voters voted for Zoran Mamdani. The other big factor in the election was the economy. Most young people in the United States cannot afford a house or even rent. The average automobile in the United States today costs $50,000. In 1973, my parents paid $67,000 for the 4-bedroom house that I grew up in, but now we can live in our car. Mamdani campaigned for a rent freeze and more affordable housing. Mamdani was a foreclosure counselor before he got into politics. And then President Trump helped Mamdani. He posted on Truth Social the day before the election, "Any Jewish person that votes for Zoran Mamdani, a proven and self-professed Jew hater, is a stupid person." That made people more angry. According to Mamdani's campaign, they had 104,000 volunteers who knocked on 3 million doors. He received over 1 million votes, over 50%. He did also pick up some endorsements from very slimy, unreputable people like Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not to mention the disgusting pro-Zionist governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, who put herself in a terrible pickle because she had driven Cuomo out of politics, and then he was the main candidate, so she had no choice but to endorse Mamdani. That's what I mean by a poetic principle. Mamdani himself may turn out to be terrible, or he might be good. But that's not the point. It's the dynamic of the election. So what does that mean for us? We're in a revolutionary moment. The moment Lyndon LaRouche described when he said, "When you turn the light switch, the water comes on, and when you turn off the water, the lights go on." This is how the world is working right now for the billionaire elites who think they control everything. Everything they try to do to save their system, whether it's printing more money or not printing more money or censorship, it doesn't work. And by the way, they're also bankrupt. As you may know, last Friday, the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury had to pump $50 billion into overnight lending, the largest since 2019. So we have an urgent task, which is very personal for each of us. We must not allow ourselves to be little people. We must become big people quickly. Lyndon LaRouche once said to me and a group of us when we were running for office that the mark of a great leader is not to march around telling people what to do, but to create more leaders. It is not a competition. Do you think the planet has too many leaders right now? We do have too many pompous idiots who parade around in a self-deluded fantasy. But true leaders, we suffer from a lack of leadership. How do we become leaders? And Jacques has referenced already what Pope Leo XIV reminded us when he spoke about Nicholas of Cusa, and Helga here is the expert, I think, in the world on Cusa. And Cusa echoed Socrates, that the most important thing, if you wish to lead other people, is that you must recognize that you don't know. That we don't know anything. We must have faith that there is a principle of perfection. The creator of the universe has created perfectly, but that we, in our limited sphere of mortal existence, can only strive to be less imperfect. That we must be open to the joyful process of learning something new, which brings us to a higher understanding than we had previously. So we must be prepared over and over again to abandon ideas which we had had previously, which then turn out to be wrong. The amazing paradox for all of us is to know that truth does exist. It is not your truth and my truth, and that kind of nonsense we hear today. Speak your truth. I hate that. Truth does exist, but in our lifetime, the best we can do is to apprehend it less and less imperfectly, and that is the beginning of wisdom. It is from this standpoint that we can end war and instead focus on our common enemies, which are those things that would prevent us from developing our creative potential, namely poverty, disease, war, and fear. And I'd like to go now to a short excerpt from a speech that Lyndon LaRouche gave in 2008 on this question.
We are peoples on this planet of different cultural backgrounds. We depend upon our association with culture, our culture, in order to think, in order to communicate among ourselves, among our own people. And to unite our people with a common culture, or what becomes a common culture, to cooperate with nations of other cultures, and to define common aims of mankind, common goals of mankind. I'll refer to one here today of that type. This is something we're supposed to have learned in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. The aim of the victory lies not in war, but in peace, in the peace of peoples who have replaced killing each other with cooperating with each other and using their differences in cultural background as the basis for their cooperation, not for their conflict. And to use the weapons of warfare only as is necessary to maintain and defend that peaceful order with a minimum of effort, a minimum of conflict when necessary. So therefore, the time has come, instead of saying, who is the enemy? I can tell you who the enemy is. A British Union jerk. That's an enemy. There are other enemies. But how do we overpower our enemies? What's the best way to overpower our enemies? To conquer them? No. Conquest is not victory. It's to dissuade them from continuing to be enemies. And how was that done in 1648? It was done through the Peace of Westphalia, of putting the benefit of the other above one's own. And if people do that, then you have a system of cooperation, a Westphalian system as it's called. That's Roosevelt's intention, was to create a global Westphalian system. To take leading nations of the world, which at that time were the United States, China, and Russia, the Soviet Union then, who had conflicts, very serious conflicts. And to take these nations and bring them together by working each for the benefit of the others, the common benefits.
So in terms of policy, how do you take all these airy ideas and make policy out of them? What do people need to be able to develop their talents? Is it useful to have housing, to have adequate food, to have decent health care? What about teachers, libraries, great artists and scientists, concert halls and laboratories? This is what confronted the founders of the United States 250 years ago. How do you form a government which allows the human individual the greatest possibility of developing their mind, of making a contribution to the future development of mankind? This is why the American Declaration of Independence says that our inalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not life, liberty, and property. Try and take that with you after you die. So governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed to do that. So what does that mean? It means that you better study physical economy. It means that you have to know how to ensure that future generations will be more numerous, live longer, be smarter and happier than even we are today here. And we have to master these ideas quickly. This is what I fear in the United States right now. We have a government of stupid people. People who think they are smart. Isn't that the worst thing? When someone who is stupid believes that he or she is smart. And it's okay for people to be stupid. I mean, not really, but if they're not in government, it's not that harmful. But if you're in government, then it's very dangerous. And again, Jacques mentioned this, but in a different context. I'll give you one example, which is that, as he said, the Russians announced that they had tested the Burevestnik missile. It is a nuclear-powered missile. It traveled 14,000 kilometers, which is a great distance. It can fly for a really long time undetected and then hit you. So some moron in the Trump administration decided that Russia had tested a nuclear missile. They didn't test a nuclear missile, you idiot. They have designed a nuclear energy fueled missile which can fly around the world probably several times. And yes, it can carry a nuclear warhead, but it doesn't need to, because right now this missile, the Poseidon launcher and the Orezhnik, there is no defense. No one in NATO can stop these missiles. So what does President Trump say? We're going to resume nuclear testing because China and Russia are doing it. How stupid. Does he know what he is talking about? Apparently not. Does he care how the rest of the world responds to that? And then, our Secretary of War with the wonderful tattoos, who can do a lot of push-ups, very important if you're running for office. Does he care how the rest of the world responds to that? No. Pete Hegseth doubled down and said, we have to test nuclear weapons because it will make us more secure. So, that's my point. They are stupid. And being stupid and holding powerful positions in a nuclear superpower is very dangerous. So we need a campaign to end stupidity in high places and low places too. We can name it after Nicholas of Cusa's important work on learned ignorance. We'll call it the Learned Ignorance Campaign, and we can be happy and relax by admitting that there is so much about our universe that we don't know. And as we discover things that we didn't understand before, we will have more power over nature, and we can raise the standard of living for our fellow human beings. Let's organize our nations not to be enemies, but to recognize that we share a common interest in the development of the human species, as in Helga Zepp-LaRouche's 10 principles, the final one being that we are each individually and as a species capable of becoming less imperfect tomorrow than we are today. There is no reason to wait. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Diane. Je vais demander donc à Jacques et José de venir. Et aussi nos candidats, si vous avez des questions pour les candidats, ils sont prêts à intervenir. Je crois qu'ils sont à peu près tous dans la salle, donc n'hésitez pas.
People in the room can ask questions.
Et donc on va passer à la... No problem. On va passer à la période de questions-réponses.
People of the panel.
La parole pour un débat national, enfin débat international populaire pour le coup.
National, international debate.
Donc, madame là-bas, s'il vous plaît.
Bonjour. Tout à l'heure, Odile Maugeron nous a parlé de la nécessité de changer la politique étrangère de la France.
Has spoken to us about the necessity to change the foreign policy of France. I would like to have your view on the Franco-Algeria relations.
D'accord, Jacques
can be the candidate or Mr. Cheminade.
Je peux d'autant mieux vous répondre que j'ai combattu dans ma jeunesse
I've been a fighter for Algeria against French colonialism.
Donc la France, elle, a eu une idée de continuer sa colonisation par d'autres moyens. Et ça a été...
had always had an idea to continue colonization by other methods.
Au même niveau, quand vous faites à quelqu'un quelque chose,
when you do something to another which is unjust, the other might do something unjust in the other way around. One of the few who has thought about these issues was Michel Rocard, who had created the conditions for development of Algeria, and some people in the Communist Party, and some people around the globe. They were not listened to. It has always been also with corrupted Algerians to cooperate, to continue a comprador colonial system. This has created a big debate in France on the agreements of 68, which are an evolution considered to 62. That's the level of debate now, which is completely unacceptable. A policy of France which would adopt to the principles of the development of the BRICS, of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, on the Eurasian Union, all the work done by Glaziev in Russia and others to develop a new unit of exchange, which will not be gold. It could be partially money, could be a basket of commodities, guaranteeing long-term contracts and not the law of the speculative markets. Algeria wants to go in that direction. Algeria has asked to be a member of the BRICS. For different reasons, it didn't happen. France and Algeria could have, on a higher level, a good relationship, but only on that higher level. On the current level, it is catastrophic, programmed catastrophe. Fatally, there will be, it will go down, it will get worse.
À noter que l'Algérie a quand même été acceptée dans la banque des BRICS.
Algeria, nevertheless, has been accepted in the new development bank of the BRICS. Another question from the room, Madame.
En espagnol, c'est possible.
Señor José Vega.
Ay, gracias. Muy bien. Sí, dime.
Can I speak in Spanish?
Te veo siempre en los vídeos, te veo cómo trabajas con esos ciudadanos tan llenos de entusiasmo.
I see speaking in English, and I see the way you've spoken with such enthusiasm. How is that patriotism of yours? How can it be that when you face your enemies and you put everything in play, you deal with security posed against you and they force you out of the room, where does that that emotion come from? How can we make it so that we here or in other people that are with part of this, the LaRouche movement, how can we continue to be leaders like you are? Thank you very much for the work that you do.
J'espère que vous avez eu la traduction en français. Oui.
Lo puedo hacer en español or I can do it in English?
No, in English, please.
Я говорю по-русски. So, anyway. English? English, okay. Well, thank you for the question. I'm sorry, it's just so distracting to hear myself. I'm sorry. Thank you for the question. I would credit the ability to intervene in the way I have with being associated with the Schiller Institute New York City Community Chorus for as long as I was, but also my association with the LaRouche organization generally. What we have seen with many people now emulating the interventions that we have done over the last 2 years, 3 years, especially after the genocide in Gaza, we do see that anybody is capable of standing up and confronting people. But to be able to do that with a certain level of clarity and to also be clear about what you're saying. I mean, I'm not perfect. Some are better than others. But I credit that to my ability of learning bel canto and being taught by Diane and Michelle Aaron and others who aren't here, and my ability to sing classical music and to be able to project my voice in such a way that I can be heard and also be understood, and also having an idea that the intervention process is not limited to the event in the room. I know that this will be recorded, so I know that it'll be passed down to posterity as well, in hopes that in the future, if there ever is a time where somebody is being subjugated by an oligarchical force like we see in the United States, that they will then have the courage to stand up as well. And I think deciding to put that responsibility on yourself and say, okay, well, if no one else is going to stand up and say something that's wrong, I have to do it anyway. And I find that the truth is very powerful when it's on your side. You know, people say to me all the time, like, well, you know, you don't have millions of dollars in your congressional campaign, you don't have the resources. Yeah, but we have the truth. We're on the side of truth. And that, I mean, look, I'm in France right now. I never thought I'd be here, you know, and it's taken us quite far. And so I guess my advice to anybody who's looking to intervene in the way I have is to first of all join a Schiller Institute chorus wherever you are in the world. You guys have choruses here in France, right? Yeah, of course they do. Or in Germany, or in the United States. There's 3 different ones in the US I know you can join. And decide to join the organization as a whole and commit your life to classical principles and ideas. That is the only way in which you'll be able to stand up and intervene in a polemical way that people will resonate with. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Y gracias. ¿Quiere que lo repita en español? O?
Gracias. No. Okay, donc we'll take this question and then.
Hello, my name is Faride Gillesberg. I am active with the Schiller Institute in Denmark. I have a question actually to Diane, because, you know, the world would love to see the US to be a republic again. So the question is, you know, it's not the question about stupidity alone. It's a question about evil. Because if you take the Epstein case, there's something which can actually help to tear down this tyranny. So how is it possible to get an American revolution with the help of the Epstein case?
Well, is this working? Yeah. I think there is another American revolution. It's happening right now. I don't know that it will be the Epstein case per se. I think it may be finally admitting that the economy has collapsed, which they are trying to hide very much, and people are living on their credit cards and living on debt. I will say something here because I think it is becoming obvious, which is that it is interrelated, the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, the sexual crimes against minors and children, and the Wall Street connection, and the high tech. And I always thought, and I'm going to be controversial, that one of the reasons why we didn't get more of an outrage in the Congress, for example, against the crimes against children in Gaza, because we have a very big problem with pedophilia. And we know this. LaRouche was looking at it in the 90s in the case of Omaha, Nebraska, the Boys Town orphanage, where they would take children and fly them around the country to be abused, and then politicians would be there and they would take pictures of them, and this was one of the areas of control. When you consider it acceptable to view children as objects of pleasure, when you think it is legitimate to make prostitution part of your economy and count it in the GDP, then you have lost the center of your society. Because the measure of economy is not money or the stock market, it is the human life. And once you decide that you don't care about that, then you lose everything. And there is a bubbling, and I don't know that this is going to be the thing that causes it. At the moment, it's still somewhat unspeakable. But I think what we really urgently need actually is the inverse, which is that we lack an image of the good. What was the point of the environmentalist movement? It was to say that human beings are destructive, you are a cancer on the planet, you should consume less, eat less, live shorter. The advisor to Barack Obama on healthcare, Ezekiel Emanuel, said that once you're over 65, you should not get any cancer testing. Drop dead. It's not worth saving your life if you're under 15, if you're over 45. A very hateful view of mankind, and not recognizing that what is unique about the human being is not in the physical domain. And the United States, the reason I talked about it is because the United States was intended to be good. It was intended to be a bulwark against imperialism, against the British Empire. And most American young people do not even know this today. So the American young people they lack for an identity which will allow them to be good. And I think that this is something that we have to do a very big job in restoring, the conception of the good, and that mankind is good, and a baby has infinite potential to be good. And when we have that idea, and that the purpose of government is to defend this goodness, then in a sense we will have the revolution.
I am Chisom, and I thank you so much for the presentations. And my question goes to Diane. I'm really super impressed by all you said, and I kept asking myself, where have I been all these years that I didn't know about LaRouche? And I'm happy now because it's still not late. But my question is, listening to you, you talked about the stupidity that we actually have. We have a lot of that in Africa, you know. And I'm asking, what are the plans that could help to educate the African leaders? I know that we also need for the youth, but it's really easy to penetrate the youth of Africa, you know, to also kind of educate. And I'm happy to hear that there are courses from the Sheila Institute that could also help. I'm happy to know about that. I never knew. But also currently my concern is about the leaders we have in Africa, because before you could actually incorporate other culture into the African culture for development, we need a kind of mind evolution, which I still haven't found so much among African leaders that we have presently. So I'm wondering what plans you have, not really that you have for Africa, but what do you think we could do in order to educate African leaders better? Thank you.
Okay. Jose wants to say something too. And Jacques probably too wants to say something. I will say that the process of the BRICS, the dynamic of the collaboration among nations for economic development, is changing things already very much. And I will use an example again, which is perhaps controversial. The case of Yoweri Museveni, the leader of Uganda, who probably was involved in the assassinations of the presidents of Rwanda and Burundi. A very nasty man. I personally shut down a meeting that he gave in Washington, D.C. once, many years ago. But then he became the spokesman for, I think, the African Union at a meeting to discuss development projects for Africa. And suddenly, he sounded like a statesman, and some young people said, "Oh, Museveni is such a great leader." And I said, "Oh, yeah, this guy was so horrible, but in a different geometry, he had to actually do something different." And so I think it is the new paradigm which is emerging, which creates the potential for people to actually act better, even if they themselves don't understand what is moving them. And I think we have to have a world where the relationships among nations become on this higher level, and then people are going to respond. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
In the district that I'm running for Congress in, it's the Bronx, and in New York City, and there's a very large population of West Africans now coming into the Bronx, and also a lot of Nigerians as well. And you know, you try to talk to them about domestic politics, and then their eyes go blank. They don't know about a city councilman. They don't know about state assemblymen. They don't care about the domestic policy. But then, I was at a mosque. I was at a masjid. It was a West African masjid, and you know, there was about maybe 200, 300 people, and they all spoke Mandingo. You know, this is a language that's rooted all the way to the Mali Empire in West Africa. And, you know, I start talking about domestic policy. They're like, yeah, whatever, their eyes glaze over. But then I say, you guys know about the SEO summit? Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, oh, you guys know about the parade that the Chinese, Russian, oh, absolutely, Ibrahim Traoré was there. You know, it's so good. This is great development for the world and for Africa and all these different countries. And like, they just start waking up and their minds go like, oh. And like, why do you know about that? Like, why do I know about that? You know, of course, they know more than I do. And the biggest shock to me was, so where my office is downstairs, there's an auto body shop, a mechanic shop, also run by they're from Mauritania. And when the Russian parade happened, you know, we never talk politics. But the guy goes, hey, Baba, Did you see Ibrahim Traoré with Putin? Good things happening in the world. Will Traoré support you? Do you support Traoré? So it was good. It's good. So I only say that to say the education is completely possible through the citizenry of these different nations. And they teach me things. And we have a great dialogue. And, I think that's also real representation, too, to know that they know that I actually am invested in what they're talking about. So, anyway, I'll pass it off to Jacques. No, he doesn't. Okay.
Ce sera aussi le sujet du panel cet après-midi, de début d'après-midi, justement, où des jeunes du continent africain qui n'ont pas tous pu être là, mais qui vont prendre la parole.
In Africa, which has achieved to educate Ibrahim Traoré, which is president of Burkina Faso, people are mobilized to the colonialism, to the France-Afrique, to the French imperialism. They make a big role. There is still a lot of work to do. And there is a lot of people in these countries which will mobilize to also educate the youth, educate the leaders, which are probably also so much stupid that those who are in United States sometimes more. Madame, another question.
Oui, merci à vous tous. Et en fait,
alors parlez bien dans le micro.
Thank you to all of you.
Donc merci à Jacques Cheminade et merci à tous les orateurs. Moi j'ai une question parce que
to Jacques Cheminade.
En fait, je pense que toutes les crises sont liées.
I've got a question. I think all the crises are linked. I'm a doctor. When there was the crisis of COVID, I had the impression that we are in a run and we could not understand. And when we speak about education, it takes time to explain to people, and we don't have the way to financial means, mediatic means, because they are controlled. And I see what Macron is doing. I was very attacked by the authority of doctors.
Qui se fait actuellement sur l'ordre sanitaire avec
l'OMS, doctor, I think, and
de vraiment
there is things happening.
À cause de la crise sanitaire,
many countries were in very bad situation with the crisis of COVID.
Je ne peux pas le dire, mais enfin, je ne pourrais pas l'assurer, mais enfin, la France a perdu énormément d'argent.
How much we lose? France lose a lot of money during the COVID crisis.
Les populations qui gouvernent actuellement les grands pays, notamment la France, ce sont des young leaders, c'est-à-dire qu'ils ont été justement choisis par cette oligarchie pour pouvoir vraiment œuvrer dans le sens. Ce qu'il faut comprendre aussi, c'est que la crise des vaccins n'est pas rien, parce qu'elle n'est pas seulement une crise sanitaire, elle est vraiment une bascule, pour moi, dans un ordre totalitaire qui vient justement de l'intérieur, puisque les vaccins ont vraiment une conséquence énorme sur la psyché, sur l'organisme. Donc on est en train de changer sans un débat démocratique et même
COVID
une information sur une
and
de transhumanisme. Donc avec toute la population aussi, justement,
an attempt by the transhumanists and the vaccine lobby to take over the world, to make authoritarian regimes. I'm not trained enough.
Surtout, je pense que c'est très important de
I
voir
am
que,
a doctor,
à mon
but
avis,
I'm
c'est la question que je
not
me pose,
trained.
mais justement cet endettement de tous les pays
This
pour
huge
passer
debt
peut-être à une économie
of all the countries
purement numérique
to
avec
go
la
into a
crypto-monnaie,
digital,
est-ce que justement
completely
la crise du
digital
dollar,
economy
la
with
crise de l'euro
cryptocurrencies,
n'est pas
the crisis of the dollar,
volontairement
the crisis of the euro,
orchestrée
is
pour
this
justement passer à quelque
is
chose
not
de tout
all a
numérique
plot
et donc de tout
orchestrated
contrôlable, parce que ça,
to
c'est vraiment
impose a
extrêmement
total
important.
rule of
Donc nous
digital
sommes vraiment
tools?
dans une course contre la montre. Moi j'ai écouté
So it's a
Catherine
race against
Austin-Fitz,
time.
qui est quand même
I
qui sait de quoi
listened
elle parle
to
puisqu'elle a vraiment fait partie du gouvernement
Catherine Austin-Fitz.
américain.
I
Elle parle
didn't
vraiment
cap the name.
d'une course contre la montre dans un
She
an ou
says
2
there's
ans.
a race
Donc
against
voilà, je voudrais
time
vraiment que
in
vous
1 or 2
m'expliquiez ça
years.
parce que justement je suis avec des orateurs en qui j'ai confiance et c'est pas souvent le cas. Merci.
These are speakers. I have confidence in the speakers.
Alors,
So I want to have your take on this. First of all, the system is much more drifted away than people imagined. So what they try to do, and that there you said something, they're trying, they're creating a small crisis, pretending they can handle it to avoid the big crisis. Trump is in that sense, they eventually would organize a mini crash to avoid the big crash. What is then a leader in these situations? That is each of us. A leader is each of us today. It's people who decide that they cannot accept what's going on and who explain to others why it's happening and which mobilize themselves to do something. That's not, it means a sense of justice in the beginning, that there is something completely unacceptable. And that means you have confidence in yourself, and this confidence will allow you to, like David fighting Goliath, David could win with his intellectual powers. You have all of this. We will multiply our forces much faster than we can imagine.
Merci Jacques.
Thank you, Jacques.
On va prendre la question de Madame.
We will take the question of the other lady.
Merci pour la question précédente. Donc ça, je pense que ça rejoint le sujet sur
Thanks for the preceding question.
Les traitements qui ne sont pas des vaccins, ce sont des traitements géniques, notamment Pfizer et Moderna. Voilà. Et puis Macron nous avait dit.
This is the question I had on Pfizer and Moderna, which are not vaccines but genetic treatments. The mass control operates with these means. Concerning the war economy, we are in the war economy, especially the European Union, basically France and Germany.
Est-ce que des statisticiens, politiciens ont
pensé statisticians have tried to calculate how much it will cost to each citizen? For example, in the US or in France or in Europe, which is dedicated to the war. Have there been calculations on the taxes I pay? How much of that money goes to the war in Ukraine or the war in Palestine? What is the cost of the wars for citizens? How much costs the Israeli army? Who's financing the Israeli army? This small country which has the nuclear weapon? I know there's Western aid, France, Germany, the West. Can it be clear for everybody? What is the part? What is the part of finance? What is the part of the Islam Arab world? Thank you. One word on that. Netanyahu, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and their crowd, they could never exist without the support of the Western countries. The problem is in the Western countries, and not only the assassins. If the United States would stop their support on the Israel regime, in 1 week we probably would find a solution. With the Oasis plan, we have everything ready on shelf. It's the coincidence opposites. A deal will go into this afternoon. Israelis and Palestinians, as citizens, can find an agreement on the basis that it can be done. To talk to each other, you have to be two. Maybe at the end we will be a single state, but we need partners. Today there have to be two partners. And a peace based on common mutual development. Therefore, we have to fight for the liberation of Marwan Barghouti. He's the only Palestinian leader who can be a partner for peace in this process. The United States are not members of the International Court of Justice. When Putin is condemned, the media say, "Wow, fantastic! The evil dictator of Moscow." When he attacks Netanyahu, he says, "Oh no, it's terrible. It's anti-Semitic, etc." We're not interested by justice or the coherence, but by power as such, power to do bad to others. The Oasis Plan is a solution for that. And Marwan Barghouti, I can tell you, I know a little bit his family, I can tell you, he knows better Hebrew than Netanyahu himself. Why? Because he's interested in the culture of the others. He has became conscious of his own culture, and he has this sense of the Treaty of Westphalia, the advantage of the other. And he says we should pardon the offenses, in particular, forget not only the physical violence, also pardon the debts, which were war debts, and forget what we would call the illegitimate debts. And that is what will allow us to escape out of this conflict where people are thrown one against the others. The British Empire has always used the rule of divide and conquer. There was a French politician who said, we used to throw red ants against black ants. We have to stop this, get out of that geometry. As we have said, and several people have brought it up, we have to go to a higher level, and therefore we have to become finally human. Thank you, Jacques.
It's okay. Just on this question, I think it's very important to have in mind the world, because where is Israel? Why do we call it the Middle East? And if you think about the revolution with the United States building the Transcontinental Railroad and the Centennial Exhibition in 1876, where people from all over the world visited, and then we had the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and we had, and I guess earlier in Europe, you had prior to that Charlemagne with the canals, that when you have corridors of transportation, it raises the standard of living, it raises the flow of ideas, people become smarter, and the world could change. So if you look at the map, where is Palestine and Israel? Right in the middle of the continents of Eurasia, of Africa. It is the crossroads. So if you want to ensure that mankind will never develop and remain backwards, then keep that as a war zone. And it's the same thing with the Balkans, and it's the same thing with Armenia, Azerbaijan, the areas where they want to have the conflict because it prevents this connectivity of mankind. And now we see it in Ibero-America, where China and Peru, Argentina, where you just had this memorandum of understanding, Peru has the port of Shanghai, right? And if you get Brazil involved, we are going to have a transoceanic corridor in South America. So we can't have Brazil involved. Maybe we can have a war with Venezuela to stop this. So the wars are to stop the potential good and the development of mankind. And in the case of Europe, I think part of the game is to make the Europeans spend a lot of money on weapons to bail out the crashing stock market. Because in reality, no one, right now, all of NATO combined is not going to win a war against Russia. Maybe we will annihilate the human species, but we will not win such a war. So what's the purpose? Get the money to flow like crazy and keep the imaginary bubble system, which has nothing to do with reality, afloat.
Thank you. Et pour ajouter sur votre question, là, je pense qu'on a, les statistiques sont assez facilement trouvables de part de l'industrie de la défense dans le PIB national. On peut le trouver assez facilement et le nombre d'employés. Je ne les ai pas là en tête, je l'avoue. Mais on peut regarder un chiffre qui est national et qui est intéressant, puisque M. Cheminade a parlé du complexe militaro-financier que M. Benoît Odile, le candidat, appelait l'oligarchie. Si on regarde les 3 premiers budgets de l'État, c'est le remboursement de la dette, 70 milliards par an, c'est-à-dire l'argent qu'on donne aux financiers et aux banques privées. Et le deuxième budget, c'est la dépense militaire aujourd'hui, parce qu'on est dans une économie de guerre. Donc dans les 3 premiers budgets d'État, on a ce complexe militaro-financier, puisque les 3 plus gros budgets de notre État vont dans le militaire ou dans les grandes banques privées en termes de remboursement seulement des intérêts de la dette, puisqu'on ne rembourse que les intérêts depuis 30 ans. Donc c'est des chiffres qui sont assez significatifs. Donc on va prendre d'autres questions. Je crois qu'il y avait monsieur ici d'abord. Non, là, Sébastien, pardon, ici.
Merci. J'ai une question concernant l'écologie. Il faudrait accélérer concernant la suppression des produits chimiques.
I have a question respecting environment and chemical products and new energy, renewable energy.
Et j'aurais une autre question concernant la sécurité.
And also respecting security in the port areas. I saw a broadcast. The border police should be much more implied. It cannot only the dock workers who open the freight. Jacques recently met an official of the border police.
Les douaniers aujourd'hui ont la possibilité de connaître et de contrôler à peu près un conteneur.
The customs, they control one container on 1,000. They don't have the means and the workforce. They're very low paid, so there's a big danger of corruption by money.
So
the drugs are circulating all over. It is in that way. People see it. People are fed up. Why drugs are all over France? What's happening? Starting from that, by investigating the networks, you can look to the little book we have on the book you can buy. It has become a tool of the international financial mafia, not the local small mafia. On top, there's the whole financial system completely implicated. There were cases in Mexico with $7 billion of dollars of whitewashing, the money laundering. It has been completely accepted.
causée par des formes de production. Le produit intérieur brut est une imbécilité. Ça, tout le monde le sait. Parce qu'il est évalué en monnaie. Ce qu'il faut penser,
GDP is a stupid measure for economics. You have to consider, in the way the Chinese do it to a certain extent, you have to look the effects of economic development, and to doesn't mean you don't need to have a development, but you have to look to the impact of the economic and the productive processes on the human society. That's why LaRouche has developed this idea of relative potential population growth. Are we creating enough human beings in good shape and good conditions to be able to reproduce entire societies on a higher level and with higher capacities? Therefore, if people are trained and given qualifications, then they will be able to measure the consequences of their acts and control it. And that is the future. That is our future of our societies. Do you know the proportion of people? There are only 3 to 5% of the French population believe that their children and grandchildren will live in better conditions. Thank you, Jacques.
Donc c'est très bien et on va prendre encore quelques questions. D'abord, monsieur, oui, allez-y.
Bonjour Jacques et bonjour tout le monde. Alors moi, ma question, je vais peut-être un petit peu sortir du sujet, mais je vais quand même rester.
Hello Jacques and hello all of you. I may be going to change the subject, but I will still be in the economic context situation. It's about artificial intelligence of the jobs today and of the future and their impact on the society. Do you think that artificial intelligence, which everybody is afraid?
Une cause, enfin une raison principale.
Do you think that this is a reason for the degradation of the economy, in the sense that these young people who have diplomas on the informatics, statistics, analysis of data, like me, do you think that this is the reason of the people cannot grow, people doesn't find a job? I think this is affecting the economy.
Je pense que c'est le cas aussi aux États-Unis et dans plusieurs pays du monde. Donc ma question c'est voilà, qu'en pensez-vous?
Merci. L'intention et l'intention. Maintenant, prenons l'intelligence artificielle. C'est extrêmement utile dans certains domaines.
Concerning artificial intelligence, it's very useful in certain domains. If you send a rover to Mars,
Vous voulez mieux connaître la préhistoire aussi, il faudra utiliser l'intelligence artificielle d'ailleurs. Bref, vous voulez envoyer un rover sur Mars.
You want to send a rover to Mars?
Au moins, aller-retour, une demi-heure de communication avec la Terre.
To communicate, you need at least half an hour for the signals to arrive.
Se comporte avec un certain
the connection between Earth and Mars. So,
alors comment? Avec toutes les données rassemblées,
with all the data assembled by the scientists, which have an idea about what could happen on Mars, this will allow the rover to escape from certain dangers. It's the same for certain production areas of production.
L'intelligence artificielle sera capable de résoudre ou de donner
for certain
de matière pour résoudre des cas.
In legal matters, artificial intelligence can mobilize all the data required for lawyers, which then can do their job. That's the intention. Now, what I tried to develop this morning, the way it's used by in criminal hands, it is to destroy the capacity of the people to think. So we have to think about that in terms of evolution, which can aggravate the Aristotelian degeneracy of people, or in another way, that it can be useful to do all the repetitive work and free man for creative work. So the issue is the intention. What do we use artificial intelligence for? Are we going to degrade ourselves to be on the lower level of artificial intelligence? Or are we going on a higher level and use AI for the advantage of mankind? What strikes me is that in terms of translation, in some seconds, you can get you can translate something, and then there will be what's called a hallucination, where the robots give the wrong answer. But of course, we're using robots to translate, and then we correct all the errors. But without the man correcting the errors of the robot will be a failure. If the robots decide when you have to go to war, you're in trouble. If you have this quality of thinking, then we can have an idea of, we can envision a future, we can think a future.
Milliards, oui, probablement, en tout cas plusieurs milliards d'êtres humains derrière nous qui ont fait que nous soyons là.
With several billion people, but before us there were billions of people who created us and can help us to explore the unknown.
Elon Musk created his, by the way, for the translators, thank you. I've been speaking very slow because I've been told I speak very fast. But then I hear these two, so I'm sorry. I'm being responsible. Anyway, Elon Musk created an AI program called Grok. And he said he wanted to create this program so that there can be a truly unbiased, 100% truthful AI chatbot. There are two things I want to point out. I know that we have declined as a society. Whenever anybody posts anything on the internet, the first thing people do on Twitter is, "Hey Grok, is this true?" And the machine will say something, and then they'll say, the AI says it's not true. The AI knows everything. Lyndon LaRouche in 1992, when he was in jail, put up a very big fight on this statue that is in Washington, D.C., of a founder of the Ku Klux Klan. His name is Albert Pike. He was a traitor to the United States, an enemy of the United States, and the Trump administration has put this statue back up. When I made a video about this on my Twitter account, many people got upset with me. Why did people get upset with me? Because the first thing people said was, hey, Grok, did Albert Pike really found the KKK? And verbatim, or word for word, the AI says, no. Not only does it say no, it says, this is fringe conspiracy theory that Albert Pike founded the KKK. So many people now are like, well, the AI says that it's conspiracy theory and Albert Pike did not found the KKK. If you ask Grok, who is Lyndon LaRouche? Well, the AI says he's a far-right, authoritarian, cult leader, fringe conspiracy theorist. What is it about AI that tells you Albert Pike was not the founder of the KKK and that Lyndon LaRouche should not be listened to? What kind of artificial intelligence? See, so artificial intelligence is only what's already available and what already the oligarchs are pushing. There's nothing original or new in there. It's an advanced form of Google. That's all it is. And like Jacques said, you know, there's usefulness to some of it. But if you're using it for subjective questions, like what is or isn't true, your mind's already dead. So, anyway. Oh, sorry.
Very good. Thank you.
So, you did not ask intelligence, is José Vega right?
Alors, on va prendre...
I ask myself. It's very funny and sad.
Alors, je suis désolé, il reste 5 minutes. On va prendre...
I'm sorry, there is only 5 minutes. We're gonna have just...
Quick, and I'll speak quickly. Is that bad? Just on artificial intelligence, there's a great deal of anxiety about people losing jobs because of robots and artificial intelligence. And I think that's a misunderstanding of economics. And if you remember, well, we weren't alive, but many years ago, people worked 12 hours a day and children worked in physical labor. And as we developed machinery to replace that and a better appreciation that children should be in school learning things, we made laws that the work week should be 40 hours, no more than 8 hours a day, and children should not work. So if we can replace human labor in things like delivering packages and all kinds of other things, it means that perhaps the human workday should be 4 hours or 3 hours. Perhaps people will be in school until they're 27 or 28, not learning the garbage they teach you today, but actually studying. And then the human beings will have time to learn 5 languages, to play the violin, to play the piano, to spend hours looking at the stars and figuring out where the new galaxies are, that people will have the time to actually do the work which is uniquely in the domain of man, which is the development of creativity. So the idea that we have to have an 8-hour workday, which is threatened by this kind of progress, I think is a mistaken understanding of human economy.
Very good. On va prendre 2 dernières questions. On va prendre les 2 messieurs qui sont là. On va regrouper vos 2 questions, on va essayer de répondre et après on donnera un mot de conclusion à chacun. Donc allez-y, monsieur.
We're going to have 2 questions now.
I guess my address, I think, to Jose and Diane. I wrote it down earlier because one thing that matters here is truth, clarity. And I wanted to pick your brain. I think, Diane, you had said earlier, about kind of the foundations of the U.S., kind of to counterbalance, I guess, you're talking about principles of good, going into Malthusian theory. And so the U.S. was kind of founded on this basis of good, in the spirit of international cooperation. But I'm just questioning, because the one thing that came to mind is shortly after, we have Declaration of Independence and all men are created equal. But shortly after, it was, and there's a big backlash to this. I'm sorry, there's a lot of context to this question. But in the States right now, and in France actually here, there's a big backlash because history isn't being taught the way it was correct. What I'm saying is, shortly after the U.S. was created, you have Manifest Destiny, and then you have the U.S. expanding and I guess you can call it genocide against Native Americans. So, and right now, history, there's a big fight in history. My generation is kind of very angry at the way they were taught history. Which is, I guess it's given a lot of fire to the woke movement. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. Because it doesn't seem like, there's a lot of backlash that the U.S. was actually founded on good principles.
Yeah, thank you. And la deuxième question de monsieur? Non, devant, voilà.
Oui, bonjour. Thank you for your intervention.
Hello, thank you for you said. It's going to be in French. My question: what are the means to find back popular sovereignty and to have sovereignty on monetary emission, control of the money? What are the non-violent means? Because we know violent means, but does it exist non-violent means?
So first the question about the American principle. You want to say, Diane? Yeah.
Okay. I'll go. This will be reparations. All the Americans got it. All right. I'm from a certain part in New York City called the Bronx. One of the founding fathers there, his name is Gouverneur Morris. This is not a name you will know because this isn't taught in any history books that I know of, However, we have, the organization has. When the Constitution was being written, there was a big convention in Philadelphia. And Gouverneur Morris from the Bronx was the only person who stood up and denounced slavery and said, if the United States continues forward with slavery, this will be a moral stain on our country's history. And he had allies. Alexander Hamilton was his ally. George Washington was his ally. There are a few other people who were anti-slavery in the United States. See, the idea of slavery was actually anti-American. Slavery was brought to the colonies by the British. And I know they like to tout that they had abolished slavery before we did. They just turned it into a different form of just labor. Now, the problem is that the United States was formed to be a pro-humanist revolution. It was a culmination of all of the greatest ideas going back to Nicholas of Cusa. And even before Nicholas of Cusa, too, Ben Franklin had tapped into Confucius. All of the greatest ideas of mankind led up to the creation of the United States. And people like Hamilton and Morris knew it was not perfect. They knew they weren't going to create a very perfect republic off of the instant. They were hoping that the citizenry would be able to improve upon it. This is the more perfect principle that Gouverneur Morris wrote in the preamble of the Constitution. And, I don't think the United States is defined at all by its crimes. It is defined by the people who decided to rise above it, like Lincoln, like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, people who understood what the Constitution actually was and held up those principles in the face of adversity. All right, now the white lady can speak.
Well, Jose addressed some of it. Two things. One, on this manifest destiny, or the so-called Monroe Doctrine, which is very much misunderstood, because the purpose of the Monroe Doctrine was to prevent empire from coming into the hemisphere. It was not to spread empire. So there's a great deal of confusion on that. Slavery in the United States had nearly died out, and the British took the sugar plantations in the Caribbean, which were the most slavery was horrible in the Caribbean, which Alexander Hamilton saw firsthand, which is, I think, why he had a certain approach to economy. People would die within a month or 6 weeks of coming there, and they relocated it to South Carolina. So I don't think it was an accident that the so-called Civil War, which was a British and French orchestrated war, French, against the United States, came from South Carolina. And the intent, of course, of slavery is you don't have what we talked about with AI, which is that you're limited to what the human body can do. It is not true that slavery built the industrial power of the United States, because if we relied only on human labor, then the United States would be a cotton and tobacco producing bankrupt colony. And so these things are not, and it was a fight, and we were not perfect, and we had evil people. Albert Pike, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, came from Boston. What was that? The Brahmins, the opium trade, the slave trade, which is also something that I think will inspire young Americans, is the fight isn't over. We're still in the fight. The fight is based in Wall Street and Silicon Valley and other places. So like everything so far on earth, we don't have perfection here. We strive for a more perfect union, as it says in the Constitution. And I think the more that people can read and begin to identify with these, the founders and people who had these incredible conceptions of what it meant to create a republic, the more exciting it will be. And just one other warning. I know each of us, Jose, Jacques, Sébastien, every day, all of you, we are all very perfect and consistent in everything we do. But sometimes in history, people were not.
We take that. Sur ça.
Une question à se poser sur la France. Comment le pays?
A question we have to ask ourselves about France. How the country, which was the more important on the American independence and the freedom of the colonies of United States against the English Great Britain imperialism, how could it be that this country, with Napoleon, tried to attack the independence asked in Saint-Domingue and put Toussaint Louverture in a prison and put him to die by cold? How this country, France, could do to go with the esclavagist states of the south of the United States, which made slavery? How France could support this? We have to ask this question to ourselves. This is the question of today. How is it that this country, France, is going with a coalition of the willings, those who are in the power in Germany, Great Britain, and France? They are going with a policy of war, which is totally contrary to the fundamental founding principles of our country. How is it that there is not more courage of people which had a sense of fraternity, which they did not fight for their cause, and they went out and they let others to destroy our country? This is the true question we have to ask ourselves as French people. It's 6 minutes left, so now you can respond to the other question about monetary sovereignty. Can we take it back without violence? We have to have much more time on this. You have to buy my book. You have to buy his book, and he's gonna respond then to you later privately, because we have not a lot of time. We have the panel, the fabulous panel this afternoon. Thank you to all to come here. you come then at 3 o'clock here in France this afternoon for the Central European time. We have to respond to the cry of the people, of the peoples, of the whole world. And Jacques will gonna sign his book outside of the room for people who want to buy it. So Jacques makes conclusion of the panel. He say, I was in the car with my friend Sébastien Drochon, and we saw on the street some strange.
La première question qui passe dans notre esprit, c'est que la voirie fait plus son travail.
We see it was totally rubbish things on the street.
Presque immédiat dans ces cas-là, c'est presque immédiat tout. Je dis mais ça peut pas être ça. Et en effet, c'était pas ça.
It was not this. We see a bottle which was half drinked. It was a homeless person of his property with rubbish, and it's a very ugly that people live in this situation on the streets. How could it that we let this appear and develop? And in an instant, it passed by my mind, Gaza, Sud Kivu, Sudan, and I turned to myself. And the people who tried to come to France to emigrate to France and died in the Mediterranean, in the English Channel. And I put Mouloud Feraoun. I thought to Mouloud Feraoun. He was fighting against this, and he was assassinated. We will let people be assassinated like him? This passed by my mind very quickly, and I thought at which level, the most immediate level, can be our resources of our spirit. How can the resources of our spirit can be mobilized? And I will read you something of Jaurès, of Jean Jaurès, which fought for his whole life in policy. Oh, if I could express myself by music, dance, by painting, as I express myself by speaking, how much idea would have I that I don't have now? How many thinking that I don't have? And Lena and Feride this evening will sing. We will give examples by music, which in the human spirit can push to make the good, and how we produce, we think about art, not like a mechanistic thing, but something which can inspire us, which is something which is on the image of the composers which created these pieces of art. And I think so we have to see the intention of which has to put us going, making things. And I speak a lot about Pope, and he told something. He said, you cannot defend the Evangel with a mind of ugly face. If you want to inspire people, you have to have a good face. So you have many things which can inspire us, like Nicolas of Cusa, many people in our country, Victor Hugo, for example, which was very against the war of opium in China. You have all of this which come to your spirit, and all of this which come to your spirit with art, with science, all of this come with your spirit, in your spirit, and you break with formalism, and then you can organize. You come organizer. You become active.
Merci aussi à José Vega. Merci à Diane Sare d'être venu des États-Unis pour nous expliquer leur combat.
Thank you also José Vega to Diane Sare, which came to United States to explain us the fight they do there, which is the same like we do here. and Jacques will now sign his book outside of the room, and we're gonna be back at 3 o'clock European time. Thank you all to be here this morning. So we're gonna be at 3 European time for the next panel.